Is on. Oh, now. I just needed a reboot, maybe. Okay. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Site Plan Review and Appearance Board for Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023. Rochelle, when you're ready, if you can please call roll.
Sure. Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer.
Here.
Annette Gray.
Here.
Stephen Cohen.
Here.
Carol Perez.
Here.
Linda Perdeau.
Here.
Dana Adler.
Here. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? I see none. Thank you. I'd like a motion to approve the agenda.
Move approval of Site Plan Advisory Board, Wednesday, August 23rd, agenda.
If you can please call roll. Oh, I need a second first.
Second.
Please call roll. Thanks.
Benjamin Baffer.
Yes.
Annette Gray. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer.
Yes.
Annette Gray.
Yes.
Stephen Cohen.
Yes.
Carol Perez.
Yes.
Linda Perdeau.
Yes.
Dana Adler.
Yes. The next item is the meeting minutes from July 26, 2023. I've reviewed them and they appear accurate. If there are no changes, if someone could please make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'd like something clarified in the minutes. It was regarding B, case in court. It was approved, however, it wasn't approved for the, is it a variance or a? Sorry, I'm having to go through them.
You mean
Okay,
the waiver was not approved, right?
Yes,
For the landscaping?
because they took that away because they said they were going to plant trees instead of the palms. The applicant mentioned that they were gonna use oaks as a replacement, and then that would be, they were gonna work out the oaks with staff.
Okay, we can make that clarification.
So can we move approval to approve the minutes with the amended discussion?
Move approval July 26, 2023 minutes as amended,
And a second?
or recommendations for amendment.
Second?
I'll second.
You can please call roll.
Linda second.
Okay. Carol.
Oh, Carol second.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer.
Yes.
Annette Gray.
Yes.
Stephen Cohen.
Yes.
Carol Perez.
Yes.
Linda Perdeau.
Yes.
Dana Adler.
Yes. Okay, at this point, we're going to swear in anybody who will be speaking before the board on any matter regarding public comments or on any agenda item. Please rise and be prepared to be sworn in.
Please raise your right hand. By the authority vested in me as a notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Thank you, Rochelle. At this point, if there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak on any item that is not on the agenda but is in the purview of the Site Plan Review and Appearance Board, please come before the board now. Okay, seeing and hearing none. I'd like to touch on a few things. If you'll be presenting tonight, please use the podium on my left. Staff will be presenting from the dais in front of us. And then the next item is the approval of the consent agenda, but there is no consent agenda tonight. So I'm going to read through the quasi-judicial rules. This hearing shall be conducted in accordance with the City of Delray Beach quasi-judicial rules. The applicant and the city shall be permitted to present their case. The public shall be allowed to speak for 3 minutes each, or a maximum of 6 minutes if the person represents an organization or a group of people who are present but agree not to speak. The city commission, board members, staff, and the applicant may be allowed to cross-examine a witness. The city or the applicant will be allowed to offer rebuttal testimony. The decision to approve or deny an application or appeal may not legally be made upon personal views as to whether a project is a good project or not, nor may a decision be based on the number of citizens who support or oppose a particular project. The law requires that all decisions must be made on the basis of whether the project meets the requirements of law, the comprehensive plan, and the land development regulations. Okay.
Chair, if I can, before we move into
Yes, you have an
our
introduction.
First item, 9A, and my apologies, I meant to do this sooner in the agenda than right before we're starting our quasi items. But sitting with me is Rafiq Ibrahim. He is our new principal planner with current planning, and so he will be the new SPRAB board liaison. He just started with us on Monday. We're very excited to have him as part of our team. And so he's taking on the position that I previously had as I've transitioned into another position. But I don't know if you want to say anything now or wait till after the meeting under staff comments, but so that you know that he is here and part of the meeting tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right. So, Ms. Buse, we have item A. If you could enter the item into the agenda, please.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jen Buse, planner for the City of Delray. This is item number 2023-143, and the applicants are here.
Okay. Has there been any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
No. Okay. All right. Ms. Phillips, I believe.
How are you? I'm Virginia Phillip. This is my partner, Pia Chiranjiva. We purchased a small building on 75 Southeast 4th Avenue. It's a small building. It's a little bit of an eyesore at the moment. We're really excited to be in Delray. We were hoping to be in Boca, and we never thought that we would be able to afford to purchase a building in Delray, but we did. We purchased it last November. So we are in the process of trying to get your approval for our business, which is basically a wine store. Let's see, I think next slide. So I'm Virginia Phillip. I'm a master sommelier, so I'm one of 28 women in the world to have achieved the master sommelier title. We are 260 worldwide. Lots of accolades. I'm sure you could Google me and you could find lots of things. But the main thing is I opened up a store in West Palm Beach in 2011 and relocated it in 2017 to Palm Beach in the Royal Point Santa Plaza. And our goal is to create something unique and to give our expertise to the wine world and to our clientele with this new location. So it's 705 square feet. It's quite small. We have a wonderful architect, and we're going to jam pack it with beautiful racking and wonderful wines and of course non-alcoholic as well. At any rate, we have a couple renderings that we'd like to show you. This is the current front of the building, which we will be replacing with all hurricane-proof glass. It's ironic because last November we were so intent on getting this building that literally before that hurricane was supposed to hit us, we moved up our closing date one day just to get the building. So we're going to replace that with all hurricane-proof glass. It'll be a see-through glass in the front with logo, etc. And the next slide, I think, shows you the rendering from the front. So you can see we've got beautiful design work going on. At the top, which is the north facing, that is a mural. That is not the exact mural, and we have a different rendering for that, which is a different topic, but it is an artist that we commissioned out of Florence, Italy. She has done some work on other wineries in the Italian community, and so we commissioned her to create this illustration, which is really cool, and it will be done on the building. Pia, you want to add anything?
No, I just want to introduce myself as well. Virginia and I have been partners in the Palm Beach store for a while now, and one of the reasons that we're trying to come into to this market is because we have a lot of clients in the area who don't necessarily want to schlep all the way up to Palm Beach, and we'd like to be able to service their needs in South County. So here we are, and we're ready to get started as soon as you guys let us.
So the goal is to remove this mural of some sort from the side of the building. It's a former ice cream parlor, to this other mural, which I think we have a shot of, Jennifer, I think maybe? Yes, okay. So that would be the new shot. So this is called Il Cuevo, and it is a rendering of obviously a myriad of things, but it's very eclectic and cool and bright, and we hope that people will feel the need to come and take their photo in front of that mural because it is so stunning. So we're going to be about 1,000 selections. Again, the interior of the space is well executed. We have all custom rackings. We just met with our contractor yesterday, and it's all custom built. I don't know if we have any more slides, do we?
No.
So we do have parking in the back. We can probably accommodate 3 to 5 vehicles. Our employees are going to park in the parking garage, which is
With the
IPIC Theater. And there is lots of parking in the front, paid, metered parking. Does anyone have any questions? Or?
Thank you. All right, Ms. Buse for the city, please.
Do I hear music?
If someone's cell phone is on, if you could please shut it off as we're being recorded and we can hear your ring. Thank you.
So this is agenda item number 9A. This is 75 Southeast 4th Avenue. It is in the CBD, Central Core, and land use designation is Commercial Core. The adjacent zoning is all CBD, Central Core, and the existing use and the proposed use will be retail. So a little bit of the project description. You have the existing on the left and the proposed on the right. This is the front elevation, which is on the west. You have the removal of the storefront with the transom frame and glazing, the storm shutters, the exterior door, and it is all being replaced. The removal of the mural on the north facade, I just want to mention really quickly as you get into your discussion. As you know, the mural is not up for discussion tonight. It goes through the Public Arts Advisory Board. The replacement of the windows and doors on the east elevation and a new opening on the north elevation. The painting will be done, and then they are bringing in a vertical cherry wood element to the kind of the parapet area. So LDR 4413 has frontage standards. They are just doing a cosmetic. So with this, they did have to meet the base, which they do, and the glazing. So they have met these requirements. And these are the applicable regulations, and what I put out here is the awning is existing, and it's 4 feet out, and it does go into the right-of-way just a little bit. So under the canopies with the right-of-way, you have to have a hold harmless, which we are executing at this time. We have our findings with architectural elevations. And just to mention a couple things, the building was built in 1950 as the Main Street vernacular. The proposed changes are minimal with the keeping of the same window openings. They are updating all of the light fixtures to give it a more modern look. The buildings along the block are some of the original structures of similar size and scale, and the proposed cherry wood lock system is complementary to the 4th and 5th building, or the IPIC building, which is behind it. And just below there, you have a comprehensive element, which is downtown and surrounding neighborhoods, which is to protect and enhance the Village by the Sea character. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing and hearing none. Is there any rebuttal from the city's presentation?
No.
Okay. All right, so we'll open it up for a board discussion. Ms. Prideaux, if you'd like to begin.
All right. I just had a question. Will there be outdoor seating? As there is now? No?
No, it's strictly retail space at this time.
All right. And then I'm happy to see the mural gone. I was wasn't happy with it when we voted it in, so, but thank you, yeah, that was my only question about the.
I mean, we may have a table outside for the employees to eat lunch, but
Oh, in the back, there was like for the dumpster and all that, there'll be screening, or what will be back there to kind of block that out?
we don't have a dumpster, we just have disposable trash,
Okay,
recycling bins.
okay.
There's an outdoor storage unit, so.
That has the water heater and that stuff in it. It's a
Yeah.
utility.
Yeah, because it was kind of a mess for a while back there, yeah.
Yeah, we're cleaning it up.
All right, Mr. Cohen.
I have no comments. It's good.
Ms. Paris.
Yeah, I think it looks great.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gray.
Thought I recognized the face from my West Palm Beach days.
Yes.
Welcome, great job. I have no objections. It looks good.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Baffer.
I think it's great.
Okay, so I'm very excited, and I mean, moved to Delray in 2019. In 2020, my husband and I watched the film Uncorked, which is about becoming a sommelier. And then after, it's incredibly difficult to become a sommelier.
That was in episode 7 of that series.
And so then I figured, oh, we like wine. Let's Google to see if there are any sommeliers or master sommeliers locally, and who came up but Miss Phillips. And at the time, I don't know if it's still true, sommelier of the Breakers.
Yes, wine director, yep.
So, I mean, she's quite famous. So to have you come to Delray Beach is a big honor for us.
Thank you.
And the building looks beautiful, and my husband and I are very excited for you. So thank you for investing in Delray Beach, and good luck. And so at this point, if someone could please make a motion.
Yeah. Move approval of the Class 1 site plan modification 2023-143 for Virginia Phillip Wine located at 74 Southeast 4th Avenue by finding that the request is consistent with the land development regulations and the comprehensive plan.
And a second, please.
Second.
You can please call roll, Rochelle.
Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer.
Yes.
Nick Gray.
Yes.
Stephen Cohen.
Yes.
Carol Perez.
Yes.
Linda Purdell.
Yes.
Dana Adler.
Yes. Congratulations, you've
Thank
been
you.
approved.
very much.
Really excited. Thank you.
And feel better with that. All right, so item B, if we could have Ms. Rodriguez enter the item into the record, please.
So I'll state for the record, my name is Susie Rodriguez, and I'm a planner for City of Delray Beach. I'd like to enter file number 2023-091 into the record. This is for item 9B, which is a Class 1 site plan modification for Chow, located at 441 East Atlantic Ave. The applicant is here to present.
All right, and has there been any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
No.
Okay, all right, Mr. Costello, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Chair, Board. Jeff Costello, JC Planning Solutions, Delray Beach, Florida. Representing 441 East Atlantic LLC. This is the property located just west of 5th Avenue, East 5th Avenue, adjacent to, here we go, just west of 5th Avenue along Atlantic. On the north side, this used to be the former magazine newsstand. We all remember well. Just some few photos. I think last week, or the last meeting you had last month, Del Moro's just abutting this property was before you all. There it is. And just some properties to the west, to the east, Blue Mercury, and then to the south. Cut 432. So the proposal is a modification to the existing facade of this structure, basically involving removal of the garage door and the awning, installation of new impact-resistant windows, a storefront consistent with the CBD regulations, installation of new fabric awning, and this would extend 6 feet from the building as the current awning does. This does include an increase in the parapet height to basically differentiate the building from others and focus on the new storefront, and the color change from gray to the white with gold trim. Positive findings are made in the staff report and can be made with regard to 4.6.18 E1 through 3. This particular building is in proposed elevations in conforming with good taste and design, significant enhancement to the area, and will be in harmony with the general area. Just some points to make in response to some of the comments in the staff report. Again, the elevations are compliant with the CBD development standards. The increase in parapet height reduces the nonconformity that currently exists, and the height is consistent with the height of the parapet that exists immediately to the west, adjacent to Del Moro's. It is in proportion to the overall building. The building is actually 22 feet wide and includes the adjacent base. So this is the entire width of the building. And then the awning is compliant with the Florida building, will be compliant with the Florida Building Code, and we will execute a hold harmless agreement to allow that encroachment, the 2-foot encroachment into the Atlantic Avenue right away. So based on that, we appreciate and respectfully request approval of the elevation as presented and available for any questions, as well as our architect with Steve Sieber Associates. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Rodriguez for the city, please.
Chair, while staff is loading the presentation, the microphones maybe aren't picking up as well tonight, so just to encourage the board members to speak more directly into the mics whenever they speak. And Mr. Costello, if you can take the podium mic and point it more directional to where the presenter would stand, that might help us as well. Perfect, thank you.
So the property is zoned Central Business District within the Central Core Subdistrict. It's currently vacant, and it fronts a primary street, Atlantic Avenue. It's within the required retail frontage area. It's in the Atlantic Ave limited height area and the Atlantic Ave parking district area. The existing structure is split into 2 properties that function entirely on their own. This application is for the tenant space to the east, previously occupied by the Delray News and Tobacco Center for about 35 years. The tenant to the west has already agreed to remove the shared awning and is also in the process of their own modifications. The proposal consists of the removal of the existing awnings to provide a new canvas awning. It includes the color change from gray to white and the replacement of the existing garage type opening to storefront windows with gold window trims. It also includes the increase of the parapet height. These are your required findings, also provided in the staff report. The request requires review and analysis of the CBD frontage standards and the architectural elevation findings. So the property is required to provide retail frontage, and the proposed storefront windows creates that storefront frontage type. The proposed storefront meets all the requirements from LDR section 4413 E4E, except with the building setback, which is an existing nonconformity. The proposed parapet. The proposed parapet increase meet the max allowed parapet height, and due to the canopy extending into the public right-of-way, a hold harmless agreement is required with the city. These are your architectural elevation and aesthetics findings. The proposed style is consistent with the Main Street vernacular architecture style. The awning complies with 4618 and the architectural elevation's minimum standards. Both the storefront and awning are anticipated to improve the pedestrian experience, as it would generate more interaction and provide shade and cover. All buildings must have a clearly defined base, middle, and top. And overall, the building height is not exceeding the max height, and it reduces the nonconformity of the allowed minimum height of 18 feet. However, the proposed parapet increase makes the building seem top-heavy and alters the building's proportions. Although the height is consistent with the neighboring building to the west, the awning is placed higher and the detailing on the parapet breaks up the space. The parapet and the color change and awnings allows the tenant space to stand on its own and give each business their own identities. And the proposal is harmonious with the surrounding area that has many architectural styles that exist side by side. The proposal was reviewed by DDA on July 10th, and it was recommended to approve 7-0. And this concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing and hearing none. Mr. Costello, do you have any rebuttal for the city?
No, I do not.
Okay. So we'd like to open it up to board discussion. Mr. Cohen?
Yep. I'm okay with the increased parapet height, so I don't have any comments.
Okay. Ms. Perez?
So, I'm confused because this seems like it's one building, but you're taking only half of it and changing it. So, as far as properties go, is this a separate property from the one on the left? Because the building looks like it shares the same parapet.
It is. They are platted separately. I forget the name of the plat off the hand, but they are separate lots. They're each about 12 feet wide, and but it is the same building. It's separate bays and ownership within the building. And then I think your last meeting there was the elevation change to the bay just to the west, and I think that was going to be white as well. Yes.
I don't have any problem with this happening, but I think it should happen on the entire building as a whole.
Yeah, it's whenever you're dealing with separate ownership, that's what it was like. Who's coming in for? We submitted first, then we're going through some changes, and then they came in. I think they were working through the building department, and so we got their permission to remove the awning. They went ahead and removed their half. As you can see, it's just cut down the middle. I understand what you're saying. I think even in one building, you've seen, like for instance in Blue Mercury, there are maybe some subtle adjustments to the parapet, and I think it might have been to accommodate the sign. I don't know if you have that photo, but I understand your point. I think as the applicants have gone through this, they really wanted to stand out more from the adjacent takeout restaurant and from Blue Mercury. It is a women's apparel, I believe.
All right, so my other issue is the wall frontage. Is it the same wall frontage? Because you're going to have a paint change. Is it all painted the same?
There's probably a score line that separates the two. So I don't know if you have the approved elevation from last month, but if you notice though, even with some of the other buildings, where even if you have different tenants, sometimes there's a differentiate in the color change between the tenants, so their business is identified.
The thing is, you're taking one flat wall, and then you're painting it two different colors, which with
Yes.
no relief showing the difference of.
So right
like
there,
if you
right
want it
there
to
is-
pop out, maybe it should pop out and have some relief. Or
Well, I'm not sure this finish of this bay, but there is right there. There's a score line, and this was white, and this is gray, which we're getting away from the gray. It is a smooth stucco finish. We wanted to basically very clean edge, more modern facade on the
Okay,
structure.
I just think it's going to look odd, and I don't think it's going to fit in elevation-wise when you paint two different colors on the same plane. Because at the top, even if there's a score line at the bottom, if you look at the top in the parapet, I don't even see a score line. I just see one, like above the awning, I just see one solid wall.
There's a relief here.
Yeah, I don't think it's enough relief, though. I don't think it's enough. That's just my. That's,
Right. So
that's
they
my
will be
opinion.
painting white, I believe.
All right.
Delmoros. I believe it was approved at white. I don't know if it's an exact shade of white, but it's going to be white.
Can you go back to the photo that has what's currently going on? Maybe that'll help.
I I think a little further down there's a straight, oh, maybe that's it. A little, here, I think I can.
Here, down to the left. Oh. Yeah. That one.
Let me see. There, how's that one?
Yeah.
Is that the straight on shot?
Yeah.
And so they haven't, obviously, they put in their sign, but they haven't finished their changes to the front facade. Yeah.
I mean, it's even stuccoed the same. Doesn't it go all the way across? I mean, does anyone else see that? I can't,
Well,
doesn't it look
Yeah,
the
it does
same?
look like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Well,
the
well, it used to be
texture
one, too.
is, yeah, it's a very rough.
all right.
And our intent is for my client's bay to be a smooth stucco finish, more modern, refreshed
Yeah.
of this facade before you right now. So,
Okay, Ms. Gray. Can you show me the pointer, the dividing line, please? So
Right.
that building versus.
right there, right where that cursor is, there's the dividing line. And you can see there's it's a very subtle, but it's there. But they're separate ownership, separate bays.
Well, I think it's nuanced to have each business not look exactly the same, mistaken for one business as opposed to two separate businesses. I think you're proposing orange next to it, so she would like that.
I think it's fine.
I'm okay with it.
All right, Mr. Baffer.
Yeah, so architecturally, it's harmonious. It might be too harmonious for my likes, and I don't know if I'm having carryover from 4 years on HPB or not, but I hate to see the sanitization or the suburbanization of our really eclectic and cool downtown. And, this is just another example of now we're going to have another modern, clean, nice looking storefront that looks like every other, suburban shopping center or fake town center or whatever. So, I mean, I get it, a garage door is probably not appropriate for a women's apparel store, but I just, it's just kind of disappointing to see us lose the eclectic look of our Atlantic Avenue.
Ms. Perdue.
I don't have a problem with the parapet. I think, I like the idea that it's not a flat line all the way across and that there's a differentiation there. The signage will come before us later.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Signage will be a separate application.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that was, and, I mean, I understand the clean lines and all that, but I agree it would be nice if it was just, gave it a little more personality or something, but again, that's an opinion, so you know what that's worth.
All right, given the board's different takes on this and reading the application, listening, I don't have a problem with the parapet. I think that I don't have a problem with the white with the gold. I think the gold, if done well with the signage, will pop very nicely. And I think it's, I think it's great when anybody invests in Delray Beach. So I think this will be a lovely part of the downtown, and we definitely need more retail shops instead of restaurants. So that's something to consider. Yeah. So I think we're ready to make a motion.
I could do it. I'm on a roll.
Go for it.
Move approval of the Class 1 site plan modification 2023-091 for Chow located at 441 East Atlantic Avenue for the alterations to the front building facade, including a new awning, color change, increase of parapet height, and the addition of storefront windows to accommodate a retail store by finding that the request meets the criteria set forth in the land development regulations.
And a second.
A second.
Michelle, if you could please call roll.
Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer,
Yes.
Annette Gray,
Yes.
Stephen Cohen,
Yes.
Carol Perez,
No.
Linda Perdot,
Yes.
Dana Adler.
Yes. Congratulations, you've been approved. All right, the next is Ms. Rosenberg. Item D, if you could please enter it into the record when you're ready.
Good evening, Alexis Rosenberg, Senior Planner for the record, and I'd like to enter City Case File Number 2021-002, which is the consideration of a Class 5 site plan, landscape plan, and architectural elevations for the construction of a one-story retail building. We're here with the agent, which is Jordy Sophorn, with the presentation.
Has there been any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
Okay. All right, Mr. Sophorn.
Hello, good evening.
you.
My name is Jordy. How are you all tonight?
Excellent. Very good.
We are the architect firm that designed this building, Drew Tower Retail. It's west of I-95 on Atlantic.
Can you please
right at
state the
18th.
address as well?
Yeah, it's the address of the building is.
No, of your firm. Your firm.
Oh, my firm.
Yes,
My
please.
firm. I'm at 11019 Northwest 19th Street in Coral Springs. So this building is located at the northwest corner of Atlantic and 18th Avenue. It's a small site there at the corner. Everybody's probably driven by this many times. So that is the rendering from perspective. Here is the location. It's located, like I said, just west of 95 for general commercial. Very small site, just 1.5 acres. And it's currently a vacant site, has a billboard sign on it. That billboard sign is on our long-term lease, 100-year lease. And it's kind of an oddly configured site, a little bit of a challenge. So my client, the Drew Towers, have purchased this site with a vision to develop it into a small retail building or office building. So here is the site, and you can see it's kind of got this odd configuration. It's got a right angle at the back, and then at the front it's angled with Atlantic Avenue and then curved along 18th Street. So the idea behind it was to push the building to Atlantic to give that more commercial.
Sorry, if you could please shut off your cell phones.
Give that more streetscape along 18th.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sherman. Anybody in...
That's nice music.
Okay, if you can, if anybody who is present, if you can please shut your cell phone off completely. If you don't know how to silence it, it would be much appreciated. We're being recorded. Thank you.
So the intent was to push that building onto Atlantic, giving the street more streetscape and inviting pedestrians and cyclists to the building as well. And we try to maximize as much as we could on this small site. So we maximized the building with the parking that was required. And then we've landscaped. We have a great landscape architect, and they provided a lot of beautiful landscape around the perimeter of this building, as well as to the adjacent properties as well. This is, the building is built for spec. We don't know who the tenant is going to be. So it's basically, we're just building a perimeter, including all the exterior finishes, and then the interior just be devoid of space, devoid of any construction, and we'll just prepare it for a future tenant with rooftop curbs, plumbing, electric coming into the building itself. This is the elevation that faces Atlantic. You can see it's quasi-modern with the arched windows along the facade, and we tried to, with the change of the roadway from different angles, we tried to take advantage of that and give the building some different scale, as well as change of front elevation to give it some interest. And then the opposite street view on 18th Street, again, same idea. As we go to the rear, where the parking is, the doors would actually be the most visible area of this facade with the awning over top of it. Then we have the access to the roof, as well as another parking space that's kind of tucked away, which is hard to read. You can see with the shadow that that area of the building is tucked back. That's not very visible from any of the streets. And then this faces to the west, which just west of us is a gas station, and that's right on the property line. So in conclusion, we're looking for a site plan approval, as well as our approval of our elevations. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Rosenberg for the city.
All right, good evening again. So just to recap on the property information, the address is 2 Northwest 18th Avenue. The site's about 0.15 acres, and it's west of the I-95 West Atlantic interchange. The zoning district is general commercial, as well as the land use designation being general commercial as well. And the surrounding zoning districts, there is mixed industrial and commercial zoning to the north and east. There's mixed residential office and commercial zoning to the south, and general commercial to the west. Going into the existing conditions of the site, so the property is vacant with the exception of the double-sided billboard. As mentioned, the billboard is under separate ownership, and there is an existing agreement between the billboard owner and the billboard lessee that's outlining 4 easements, which those 4 easements ensure that there's clear visibility and access to the billboard, even with the development. Going into the surrounding properties, we have the gas station immediately to the west. We have the saltwater brewery to the east. There's an automotive service plaza to the north, and then there's a mix of commercial to the south. So again, the request is for a 1,360 square foot retail building that's outlined in yellow on the site plan. There's 6 required parking spaces, which include 1 ADA space, which are all provided on site, and that's outlined in blue. Then there's also a 25-foot radius right-of-way dedication, which is on the corner of West Atlantic Avenue and Northwest 18th Avenue in red. The dumpster location is on the northeast portion of the property, which is to the right of the north parking row. We also have a little over 2,000 square feet of open space, which is in green. There's also a bicycle rack to the east of the building, and the black dot to the north of the building is the location of the billboard. And just going over the elevations again, so the south elevation, that's going to face West Atlantic Avenue. Then there's the east elevation, which faces Northwest 18th Avenue. The north faces the parking lot, and the west facade runs directly along the property line, which faces the gas station. Jumping into the analysis, so the general commercial zoning is consistent with the general commercial land use, and retail is a permitted use in the general commercial zoning district. Also, the property meets the required concurrency for portable water and sewer, drainage, traffic, parks and open space, solid waste, and schools. And just to touch a little bit on traffic, the proposed project is anticipated to generate about 5 peak hour trips, and it does meet the TPS of Palm Beach County. Going into consistency, so the proposed development generally meets the performance standards in Article 3.2 and the Always Delray Comprehensive Plan. The anticipated or the use is anticipated in the general commercial zoning district. Also, it's an infill development, which is similar scale to some of the nearby buildings and contributes to the overall mix of commercial uses in the area. Also, connection is provided from the site, which connects to the existing sidewalk along Northwest 18th Street or 18th Avenue, and it also connects to the sidewalk along West Atlantic Avenue. Going into compliance with the land development regulations, so development standards for the general commercial zoning district have been met. Just to go over some of that, the height is 18 feet to the top of the parapet. There is a special landscape setback of 10 feet and 8 inches on the south side of the property, which runs along West Atlantic Avenue. All setbacks have been met. Off-street parking and bicycle parking is provided on site, and the open space exceeds the minimum 25% required. And now, touching on the landscape plan, so it has been determined to be in compliance with LDR section 4.616. Again, the 10-foot 8-inch special landscape area, which faces West Atlantic Avenue, has been met, and it contains a mix of silver buttonwood trees, lavender crepe myrtle trees, Alexander palms, and hedges and ground cover, which form a dense landscaping buffer between West Atlantic Avenue and the front of the building. There's also interior landscaping and foundation plantings that are provided to meet the minimum landscape requirements. And now these are the findings related to the architectural elevations, which address whether design is appropriate, in conformity with good taste, and harmonious with the general area, and also whether the project meets the intent of the comprehensive plan. So the minimum aesthetic standards of this section have generally been met. The property is not located in the central business district, so it's not required to adopt a specific architectural style, but the proposed style is modern overall and contains some influence from the classical tradition style due to the ornamental half-oval windows. However, the roofs in the classical tradition style are typically hipped or gabled with shingle, barrel tile, or S-tile roofs, which is similar to the example in the upper right. So the proposed building has some modern influence with the flat roof, the simple geometrics, and the stucco finish. It's generally harmonious with the surrounding one-story commercial and light industrial development surrounding the property. However, consideration should be given as to whether the proper design concepts have been utilized to reflect the intended retail use. The board should also consider whether additional treatment to the south facade, whether it be maybe awnings or rectangular windows, would create a better defined storefront that's similar to other storefronts in the city, like the example on the bottom right. Another consideration to possibly help lighten the building is to change the color of the mullions and muttons from black to white, just to kind of see what that would look like. That example is provided in the bottom left image. And then lastly, consideration can be given as to whether elements of interest should be included on the north facade, which faces the parking lot and houses the main entrance. And so these are just the technical notes that are required to be completed prior to site plan certification and building permit. Most of them just have to do with getting an updated TPS letter from Palm Beach County, which would probably end up being the same or very similar amount of trips. Also approval from the billboard owner and lessee, and construction and staging information. Here are the optional board motions, and that concludes my presentation. But I'm available for questions. Oh, and here's the floor plan too.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing and hearing none. Mr. Suphorn, do you have any rebuttal for the city's presentation?
No. No. We've talked about everything that she discussed, yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll open it up to board comments, and Ms. Perez, if you can begin.
Okay, what's the difference in elevation, like between your roof and the billboard? Like how high is that billboard? Is it
Carol,
way up
can you
there?
move the microphone closer?
Yeah, I can't hear you. I'm
Is
sorry.
how high is that billboard? Like, is there a big difference in, what's the difference between the roof and then the bottom of the billboard? Is it high up there? Or?
Yeah, I think.
Hi, if you could
My name is
please,
Christian Rutau.
if you can please speak into the microphone, Miss.
Yes,
Miss-
my name is Christian Rutau. I'm owner of the property. We measured the bottom
I'm sorry, could you please also state your address for the record?
where I live, or
Your business, please.
that's my residence. My residence, you mean?
Which-
17037 Newport Club Drive, Boca Raton, Florida 33496.
Great, thank you. And have you been sworn in?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. You may continue.
Thank you. So we did measure from the ground to the bottom of the billboard. It is about 27 feet. The height of the building to the highest elevation, it is 18 feet. So the difference, it's about the difference.
10.
Thank you.
So you said 37 and.
No, 27.
Oh, it's 27 to the bottom of the billboard and then 18 feet
right.
for the. Okay. And then I reviewed the landscape plan, and you're right, your landscape architect did a very nice job. Looks good. I think, Atlantic Avenue will be much improved with all the planting there, too. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. All right, Ms. Gray.
I'm actually struggling with this one because I don't actually think it is, the design is consistent with the proposed use. So if this is proposed retail, I don't see the clear delineation of where the public is accessing the building. And I'm sorry, are there proposed awnings or no?
The only proposed awning we have is at the entrance, which is on the west. The north elevation. The other elevations on the east and south sides have a landscape buffer between the building and the sidewalk. So it's fully landscaped along those elevations, and all the parking for the site is on the north side. So that's the identifier for people to come in once they park at the site.
Okay, so I believe to be consistent with the area and the proposed use, two of the examples that were provided in the staff report, particularly the bottom one, is more consistent with that neighborhood and where that neighborhood is going. It lacks architectural details for me. I can't support it at this time.
I think that the pictures, the examples that were provided were examples of buildings in Delray Beach, but not
East Delray.
specifically in this area.
I'm aware.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Baffer.
First of all, I'm amazed that you're able to squeeze this building in to that site and the parking and landscaping and everything. That's
Thank you.
just
I appreciate that.
amazing
Somebody
job.
recognizes that.
I would not have thought that that's a usable site for anything other than a billboard. Architecturally, the thing that I struggle with is that the entrance is on the north elevation, which is technically the back of the building, and you're approaching where there's no windows and that enormous roof ladder. So I don't know if I understand that happens because you push the building out to the front, and so you access it from the back, which makes sense. But it looks like a back of house, and I just don't know that that seems that. If I drove up there, I probably wouldn't think that that was the front entrance. So that would just be my only comment.
Okay. Ms. Perdue?
Yeah, I agree along those lines. I think the south and the east elevation look great. The north, with it being the main entrance, I would like to see maybe the ladder move to the west elevation between the two.
Unfortunately, the west wall is like right on the property line.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah,
that's why the west wall is really doesn't have anything going on there.
I just, that's the entrance, and so, I mean, the other two, the south and the east, are very attractive as compared to, for me anyway, as compared to the north. I'd just like to see it jazzed up a little bit, maybe.
Right, Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I think this building meets the absolute minimum aesthetic standards. But it is a little bit plain, considering some of the other projects and some of the comparisons here that the staff provided, which I like. I do think if you add the white to the framing that you suggested, I thought that was definitely an improvement. On the bottom left there. I just think the building is just kind of plain looking and just sort of flat. So I think it needs a little bit more.
So I'm infamous for being the anti-gray lady. I don't know if city staff communicated that. So I think it's a triumph as far as the shaping of the building, but I find it maudlin, honestly. And I think the facades all around need work, need to be more welcoming, need more color, and certainly the white grid is helpful, but I think it needs more, and I think I would not support it at this point. So, given what I've heard from my board, I think we would go back to you and say, would you like to have a continuance? Because if we vote and we vote no, it becomes more difficult.
So, I mean, the building does have a lot of, definition in terms of its play, even though some of the elevations, when you look at them in flat view, you can't really feel that depth. But there is a lot of depth to the building itself, and use of different types of concrete block and the site itself. I mean, even though this front elevation that you're looking at, it looks flat, but it's angled, and it goes in and out quite a bit. Barring that, the other thing that you mentioned was colors, which we have gone back and forth with colors quite a bit on this building. Painting the building a different color is not an issue. Like we said, we've worked with the Drew Towers on different color schemes. We just arrived at presenting this color scheme because we couldn't come to a final conclusion on it. But the Drew Towers have expressed that the color of the building is not really of primary importance to us, and we will do that if that's what we need to do. And then on the back side of the building, where we're facing the parking lot, because the building is extremely small, and the intent is to be retail, you need space for retail space to have racking displays. So that is really the only reason, and as well as storage areas. So that is really the only reason that we did not put windows along that facade, because that was the thought that maybe it'd be a point of sale where the door is. That's going to be the main entrance for deliveries, as well as a restroom and some storage areas. So we need some, unfortunately, blank walls in order to do those sort of things that are typical in retail. And we wanted it to be more inviting from the primary facades, which are on the street sides, rather than the parking lot side, and I just identify the entrance from the parking lot side. So that was the thought process. And I don't know if that makes any difference to anybody on the board, but that is what we were intending in our design.
Sure.
I can certainly appreciate that, but one of the concerns I have as a board member is as we run out of inventory of buildable space, these infill projects where folks are trying to maximize this space needs more attention to detail and wow factor to support, so we're seeing a lot of projects that are getting pushed into these little spaces trying to make it work ideally for one concept or the other. And I feel strongly that particularly those projects should be held to a higher architectural standard. It doesn't need to look like everything else. I think it's nice to see, eclectic, diverse, oh, look at that building, look at that. So I'm not wanting it to look like everything else, but the depth to which you refer is not reflective here. The architectural treatments to which you refer, I'm not seeing what your intent was with this building. And I do think color would help, and some additional exterior faux architectural details to have the building pop a little bit more, given that, and it's not really just for us, it's for that's a very busy thoroughfare, and I know exactly that area, your eye automatically goes to that big billboard, so it probably would even help you and your customers, and then the entrance is on the back, so I think we redesigning or reconceptualize the architectural treatments would satisfy us, but I think it would go a long way with helping your potential end users as well.
Yeah, I mean, Delray Beach, it's whimsical. Our architectural style should have some whimsy in it. It's the village by the sea, and we're not seeing that here. As I said, it looks rather maudlin. Instead, it's not inviting. The colors and the dark
buildings.
windows.
Yes.
Pardon?
I said we do design modern buildings.
No, not modern. Maudlin. Maudlin meaning like death.
Death. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's insulting.
So I think that we should probably, it's up to you. You can elect to have a vote, or we can move to continuance.
Not if you think it's death. I don't want a death vote. Let's say that.
Can I ask a question? On the south elevation, it looks as though the building is stepped into different levels, right?
Yes.
Can that be, again, we're not supposed to design from it, but could that be switched to the back, the north elevation, and even faux windows put on that north? Everything else looks good, but then you have your entrance, to me anyway, just looks, it looks like a back of a building.
Like a warehouse.
Yeah.
Or something.
Understood.
Ms. Prideaux, could you, sorry, just put microphone next time.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Short consultation. We're going to come back.
Good idea.
Okay.
I'll move to continue with direction.
Second.
Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer,
Yes.
Annette Gray,
Yes.
Stephen Cohen,
Yes.
Carol Perez,
Yes.
Linda Prideaux,
Yes.
Dana Adler.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. Thank
We'll be
you.
back.
Okay. All right, so we're up to item D, Valhalla Condominiums, and we have Ms. Rosenberg again, if you can enter the item into the record, please.
Yes. Good evening again. Alexis Rosenberg, Senior Planner. For the record again, I'm introducing City Case File Number 2022-189, which is the continuation of a Class 5 site plan, landscape plan, and architectural elevations for the construction of a 4-story mixed-use development located at 235 Southeast Avenue. And we're here with Josh Nichols, who's the agent for the application.
Thank you. And has there been any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
I believe I saw elevations from the architect.
Okay. All right, Mr. Nichols, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Josh Nichols for the record, representing Valhalla Condo, and with me is our development team. We also have, who will be doing the meat of the presentation, really, our architect, Keith Beal. But I'm just going to start off to just kind of reorient you to the site again. This was before you June 28th of this year.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you just state your address for the record as well?
Yes. So the firm Schmidt Nichols and we're at 1551 North Flagler Drive, West Palm Beach.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm going to go through the first couple slides and turn it over to Keith. But just again to reorient you from the June 28th. So this project is located, again, 235 Southeast 5th. It's across from the Aloft structure there to the west of us. It's got our parcel has an existing office building on it that would be demoed for the development of 7 units condo with a small retail facility on the first floor. It's a 4-story building, and this is a quick site plan just again to brush you up on this. So we do have alley access. We actually closed off the access to Federal, which this is the southbound Federal side. FDOT asked that we close that off, and access would be fully gained from to and from the alleyway. We also did have a 2-foot dedication in there to bring the alley up to current standards. All the required parking is underneath the building. You can see as you move forward, there's some ground level retail, the residential lobby, and the trash room and other amenities that are required for the operations. And from here, so again, we worked through, I think, all of the site plan items, landscape, site plan, all those details, and I think we were left with a couple concerns on the architectural renderings and elevation. And so I will turn it over to Keith to discuss those in further detail. Thank you.
Good evening, Keith Beal, Karisawa Dagula Architects, 185 Northeast 4th Avenue, Delaware Beach. So we're back. Had to get a chance to play with the building a little bit after some feedback from the board here. And I hope that what we've provided has been an enhancement that everybody can agree on. Some of the things that we've done here would be the redesign of the tower. We really expressed the top, gave it a little top hat, we'll call it. Reproportioned the windows, more masonry modern. We darkened up the elements to kind of give that more dramatic effect. We've also solidified the awnings over the canopies over the residential balconies facing 5th Avenue, and also added wood treatments similar to the rest of them that we were doing on the other 3 facades of the building. I think, let's see, we have a nighttime rendering. So I think here you can really see the tower, the treatments of the patios and the balconies, the addition of the visual screening there on the south side, which was also one of the comments we had in the last time we were here. And then we also, not so great to see in this view, but we'll see it again where we kind of enhance the rear stairs so that they're a little more substantial, not so visible, but still gives a nice architectural element. So this facade really had not changed too much with the exception of the tower change that we did, and you can see now the stair that's on the southeast of the building. We treated it with masonry walls versus open glass railing. Kind of gives you a little better feature, better proportion. And then just as an example, this is, what the rooftop deck would be for one of the top 2 residents. I could go back, I think, is there any more images? I'm trying to remember the last images. So then we did a nighttime rendering here to kind of help show really how we're really expressing what's there. Whoop, went too far. And this opening slide as well is more of a twilight type rendering, which generally gives the best feel to the building. And then with that, I hope to seek approval.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Rosenberg for the city, please.
All right. So just again to recap on the property information, the site is located at 235 Southeast 5th Avenue. It's a little over 1/4 of an acre. It's zoned Central Business District within the Central Core Subdistrict, and it's also within the city's Community Redevelopment Area and Downtown Development Agency district boundaries. The site currently contains 2,309 square feet of office with associated parking. To the north of the property, we have a 1-story office with accessory 2-story apartment. To the west is the Aloft Hotel. To the south is a 1-story chiropractic office. And to the east is a multi-tenant commercial building. Again, here's just a closer look at those surrounding properties. And the request is for the construction of a 27,135 square foot 4-story mixed-use building with 568 square feet of ground floor non-restaurant commercial space and 7 residential units, which are made up of 1 2-bedroom and 6 3-bedroom units. So on June 28th, 2023, the board voted unanimously to continue the item with direction, with concerns to the execution of the masonry modern architectural style, needing more elements of interest and creativity, further enhancing and articulating the tower feature, and softening design treatments to reflect a more residential character. So based on that discussion, the applicant has amended the elevations by accentuating the top of the tower feature, solidifying the upper story awnings, darkening and thickening the trim around the windows and doors, and adding aluminum privacy shading with a faux wood finish to the west and south elevation. Also wanted to provide a graphic just showing the transition of the project. So the very left was the initial submittal, then we have the middle, which is the proposed rendering from the June 28th meeting, and then the picture of the proposal for tonight. So the site plan has remained relatively the same. A porch with a storefront frontage type is proposed along Southeast 5th Avenue with some steps and ramps leading up to the covered walkway. Additionally, access is provided off of the alley, which leads to the 17-space ground floor parking garage. There is a 2-foot right-of-way dedication along the alley to the east, which expands the width of the alley from 16 to 18 feet. The second floor incorporates a rooftop terrace, which houses the pool and pool deck. Here you have a rendering of the rear of the building that faces the alley, which is across from the commercial plaza. Going into the elevation, so on the left-hand side, we have the north and south elevation from the June 28th SPRAB meeting. And on the right-hand side are the updated renderings for the north and south elevation. So one of the changes is that the rear stairs on the north elevation is more solidified. The trim has also been changed from white to black with a thicker trim on the tower feature. On the south elevation, the board previously discussed wanting to see more points of interest. So as a result, the applicant has proposed the aluminum shading with the faux wood finish over a section of the windows. Here we have the east elevation, which faces the alley. That's relatively the same, other than the color change of the trim and the thickness of the trim. On the west elevation, which faces Southeast 5th Avenue, it now incorporates faux wood detailing on the first floor and a darker and thicker trim around the windows and doors. Also, the height of the tower feature has been increased to 60 feet and incorporates an ornamental feature at the top. Going into staff's analysis regarding the land use and the concurrency, that has stayed the same and is consistent with the LDR and comprehensive plan. Going into consistency, It still meets the applicable standards related to the overall consistency in 3.2, but the project is also generally consistent with the Always Delray Comprehensive Plan, which speaks to the provision of diverse housing types throughout the city, utilizing underdeveloped land for mixes of uses, and utilizing the alleys to disperse traffic and access the properties. The development complies with the applicable development standards in the Central Business District, which includes height, streetscape, and parking. Just to note on the height, the maximum allowed height is 54 feet, and the proposed building is 49 feet to the top of the roof. It's 54 feet and 6 inches to the top of the parapet, and 60 feet to the top of the stairwells, tower, and covered rooftop structures. So the code does allow parapets to exceed up to 4 feet above the maximum height allowance, and allows elevator overruns and stairwells to go up to 10 feet above the maximum overall building height. And also covered rooftop structures can go above the maximum building height as long as it doesn't cover more than 25% of the roof area. And now going into the landscaping, so overall the project provides improvements in the landscaping and the right-of-way. There's 2 existing palms in the right-of-way spaced out about 45 feet to center line, but since there isn't sufficient space to add another street tree in the right-of-way without moving the existing palms, the applicant has staggered 3 Montgomery palms adjacent to the porch columns on the west side of the building. Also, the second floor terrace incorporates a mix of palms, foxtail agave, bougainvillea, and Green Island ficus, which are mainly on the north and south sides of that terrace. And on the rooftop terrace, there's a private patio for each of the 4th floor units, and there's a proposed mix of natural plantings and also some clusia hedges. So going into the architectural elevations, the board should consider whether design is appropriate, in conformity with good taste, and harmonious with the general area, and also whether the project meets the comprehensive plan. So stone and wood details are often used in the masonry modern architectural style. Also, they're used to soften the building mass, and exterior finishes are typically stucco with the colors of whites and creams. Sometimes there's accents of greens or blues. The building does have a white stucco smooth finish with some wood finished elements, and it overall emphasizes the solidity of the structure. However, based on the modifications proposed after the June 28th SPRAB meeting, the board should consider keeping the dimensions of the frame similar to the previous proposal, as the color and thickness could make the building look a bit heavier, especially on the 2nd to 4th floors. The building incorporates a flat roof, which is true to the masonry modern style. The project accommodates a rooftop terrace, as mentioned, which is on the 4th floor. There's about 1,400 square feet of synthetic turf, which is not used to meet the minimum landscape requirements on the rooftop. Additionally, the 2 patios have a covered area that go up to 60 feet in height. Both of those combined cover up to 16% of the total roof area, which is less than the maximum allowed 25%. And those are highlighted in red in the middle graphic. And now for the tower feature, the front setback above the 3rd floor in the Central Business District is 20 feet. You might remember from last time the applicant had requested essentially relief from this section. Based on the code, SPRAB is allowed to approve structures within that setback above the 3rd floor as long as it's configured as a tower feature, and it's consistent with the architectural style of the building. So that proposal has stayed. The setback of that tower feature that is encroaching into that additional setback area above the 3rd floor, it's currently set back 11 feet from the property line instead of the required 20 feet. So as part of the consideration, the board should determine whether the tower is configured as a prominent feature of the building and whether it is compatible with the rest of the architecture of the building. Here are the technical notes. They're fairly the same as last time, just regarding finalizing the dedication of the right-of-way, and then also providing all the documentation for green building certification. And here are your optional board motions, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Seeing and hearing none.
No.
Oh, Ms. Fitz. Ms. Finst, if you can please state your name and address for the record and speak directly into the microphone.
It's not going to move any closer.
Okay.
Alice Spence, 707 Place Tavant, Delray Beach, 33445. I don't know if you can go back in the pictures, but people who living there would probably have grandchildren, and if they were to take the grandchildren up to the roof, I don't see that there's any security that's going to stop any small child from going over the top of the roof. It said 4 feet, but I don't know if you can go back to that picture, but I don't know how safe that roof is for people walking around. So I don't know if you need to have that top wall somehow secured or designed in a way to keep anybody from going over the top, but I think you need to talk about that a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And Mr. Nichols, do you have any rebuttal for the city? Okay. All right. Now we open it up for board comments. Ms. Gray.
Every time I think I'm a little too tough on our professionals, you make me proud. Thanks, staff. Thank you very much for putting the before and after up. I mean, that is really, because sometimes we struggle to, lots happen in between meetings, right? So you kind of have to remember why you were so adamant, and I'm pretty sure I was adamant, just a little bit. But good job. We spoke, you listened, and I think we have a superior product. I'm always happy to raise the bar.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Baffer.
No, I agree. It's a lot better, and I hate saying this every time, but every time we say go back and do better and bring us something better,
you do.
They do, and it's another example of it. So, good job.
Okay, Ms. Perdue.
I agree. It's much more interesting to look at, and I mean, it's not major changes, but it's enough that it just really made a difference. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Cohen.
My question is, on page 10 of the staff report, it says the board should consider keeping the dimensions of the frames similar to the previous proposal as the color and thickness of the frames of the tower, second through fourth story at weight. So we're looking at, but what exactly, because I think I agree, but what exactly are you referring to?
Basically in the tower feature, so in the left hand picture, I guess we could call them the mullions and buttons on the tower windows are a bit thinner and they're white.
Yeah.
And then in the new rendering, they're a bit thicker. There's less of them, but it's thicker and it's darker. And then the color of the trim along the windows and the doors for the rest of the building have been changed from white to dark. So it just, initially looking at it, looked like it could be a little heavy looking on the tower feature or on the second to fourth floor, because on the first floor it looks like it's still thin, but it looks a little bit thicker on the second to fourth. So that was just something for the board to consider.
Okay. Yep. Well, I think the new building definitely looks more masonry modern. It's kind of a more bold look to it, and I like the hat. It's definitely, in my opinion, an improvement. But the only thing I like about the previous rendering is I feel like there's more light getting through on the top there, and I kind of like the light and the shadow, the way it goes on the third and fourth floors. You know, it's like slotted. There's space in between the roof, the little roof overhangs. But other than that, those are my only comments. Thank you. So.
Okay, Ms. Paris.
Yeah, I think you did a good job, and thank you for working to accomplish the goal. That's it.
Yes, I concur with, oh, you have one more?
I was just going to say, I appreciate staff's comment, but because the building is so high, from a street level, I don't think the thickness will give more of an enhanced look as opposed to a heavier look when you're far away, right? But I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, and I've got one other. So also, you do have a safety railing at the roof, correct? For the record.
Yes, the safety railing required by code is 42 inches high. We have 4 foot in most areas, so it's beyond what's required for safety and also meets with the rooftop guidelines for safety walls.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I concur with my colleagues. I think we have a much enhanced, improved building, and I love the tower feature. I love the masonry modern look, and we appreciate it. So thank you. So now I think someone can please make a motion.
I could do it.
Okay. I'm still looking.
Okay. All right. Move approval of the Class 5 2022 189 site plan, landscape plan, and architectural elevations, including relief for the tower to be 11 feet from the front property line, whereas a minimum setback of 20 feet is required above the third story. For Valhalla condominiums, a 4-story mixed-use development located at 235 Southeast 5th Avenue, by finding that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets criteria set forth in the land development regulations.
And a second?
Second.
Michelle, if you can please call roll.
Pardon me, Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer?
Yes.
Nick Gray?
Yes.
Stephen Cohen?
Yes.
Carol Perez?
Yes.
Linda Perdot?
Yes.
Dana Adler?
Yes. Congratulations, you've been approved.
Great job. Thank you.
All right. All right, we're up to item E.
And Chair, I believe, Ms. Perez, do you need to step down for this item?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You'll just announce what the conflict is before you step down.
I'm stepping down because I'm the landscape architect.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And Rochelle gave you the paperwork already?
She did.
Perfect.
I'm going to give it right back to her.
Okay, item
Ready?
E. Yes, item E, Mr. Gedanik, if you can please enter the item into the record for us.
Yes, so we'll be, we're both on the project
Okay.
together. So Alexis Rosenberg, Senior Planner again, and I'm with Julian Gedanik, Senior Planner for the record. The city case file number is 2022-063, which is a recommendation to City Commission for 3 waivers from the code sections within the Central Business District. And we're here with Neil Schiller and Jeff Costello, who are the agents for the application.
Great.
Okay, so, Mr. Schiller. Oh, before I do that, is there any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
No. Okay, now, Mr. Schiller, please.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Madam Chair, Honorable Board. My name is Neil Schiller with the law firm of Government Law Group, right across the street, 137 Northwest 1st Avenue in Delray Beach. I'm here tonight
with planner extraordinaire Jeff Costello, who has already done enough talking, so he's passed the baton for me tonight, and with our client Cliff Rosen. You've seen some applications previously related to Swan. This application tonight is 3 waivers. We need 3 waivers to continue to move forward in the process, and then this, if approved by the City Commission, this project will come back to you as a Class 5 site plan approval. So you will be reviewing the architecture, all of those Class 5 things. Tonight's agenda is just the waivers. So we have 3 waivers: the front setback, the first through 3rd floors, then the front setback above the 3rd floor, and then the omission of a pedestrian passageway, which we think we're actually providing, and we'll approve that to you tonight. So for just to refresh your memory, the Delray Swan is located on the corner of 2nd and 2nd, or 1st and 2nd, depending on how you look at it. But it's outlined there in blue, and it essentially takes up a majority of the block between Southeast 2nd Street and Southeast 3rd Street along the train tracks, the FEC railroad tracks. This is what Southeast 2nd Avenue looks like today. You can see, again, that there is a smaller roadway on Southeast 2nd Avenue before the parking was built, and there is parking there now on this side of the street, the east side of the road right here. There's all paid parking there that Mr. Rosen developed with an agreement with the city. And there's little sidewalk that exists today. There are cars backing out on 2nd Avenue and creates an unsafe traffic issue. These are just renderings, and while these are just renderings of the project that are going through Class 5 site plan approval, we did want to point them out because they do have some bearing on and gives you a better understanding of the waivers that we're seeking tonight. So this is looking south from 2nd and 2nd. On the left-hand side would be the FEC railroad tracks right here. This is 2nd Avenue, and this is the front of the project. You can see here, this is the commercial space required in the mixed-use project, a public plaza, and then a beautiful new arcade with significant pedestrian and bicycle pathways. There we go. Here is an overall view from Southeast 2nd Avenue. You can see the parking that exists there today, and you can see the building, not modern, not masonry modern. So again, that's not on the agenda for tonight, but I just want to point that out. But we do get to see the pedestrian walkway and the improvements that we're making to Southeast 2nd Avenue that don't exist there today. This is the proposed site plan. We're going to refer back to this. I just wanted to put this into the record. You can see a couple of things. Plazas on the northeast side. Oops. Plazas on the northeast side here and the southwest side here. And I'll show you how the building articulates vis-a-vis the property line. So the first waiver is the front setback between floors 1 and 3. The code requires 10 to 15 foot setbacks. We are proposing 0 to 30 foot setbacks with an average of 17 feet. And I'm going to show you what this means, what these colors mean on the graphic. The green are areas on the floors 1 through 3, floors 1 through 3 that are less than 10 feet from the property line. Okay, those essentially would violate the code, those green areas, on only floors 1 through 3. The pink area is those areas that are greater than 15 feet from the property line. So those areas on floors 1 through 3 that violate the front setback that's greater than 15 feet. So those are actually greater than 15 feet. So that's what we're seeking tonight. So why are we seeking this setback? Well, we are giving up a 10-foot right-of-way along Southeast 2nd Avenue. The waivers face Southeast 2nd Avenue and the railroad track. So there's really nothing that the front of the building is facing other than paid parking and the railroad tracks. Again, we're providing a brand new minimum 10 feet of arcade and sidewalk for pedestrians and bikes, which includes a 4-foot curb zone and a 6-foot pedestrian clear zone. Those things don't exist there today. There is literally no pedestrian activity because you're going to get hit by a car backing out from one of those driveways. And again, shall not create an unsafe situation. By the way, these are criteria found in your code that we have to prove. So I'm just pointing out some of the highlights in the response because this is an important waiver for the city and for us. However, because we feel like we're providing such increased pedestrian and bicycle amenities and improvements to what exists today, that really the juice is worth the squeeze here as far as the waiver is concerned. And then does not result in the grant of a special privilege that the same waiver would be granted under similar circumstances. And again, we're seeking this waiver because we have to give up 10 feet of our property for a dedication to the city along Southeast 2nd Avenue. And again, and this waiver, the front of our building will now face the train tracks in Southeast 2nd Avenue. I want to go back so you can see this a little bit more clearly. So the waiver, this is Southeast 2nd Avenue. Oops. This is Southeast 2nd Avenue here, the street. The waiver is for these areas that are too close or too far on floors 1 through 3. And we feel that because of these pedestrian amenities that we included and have our building at our expense, in addition to the fact that we're giving up 10 feet from our property line, our east property line, for this roadway to the city, again, we feel like that the waiver is, the juice is worth the squeeze.
So they're
we meet the
widening
criteria.
2nd Avenue? Is that what, so they're going to widen it? Is that why you're giving it
We're
up
not
for?
necessarily widening it. We're giving it up for the pedestrian clear zone, the sidewalk, the streetscape improvements. So that, let me go back to this criteria. There's 4 other criteria I didn't address. The waiver shall not result in an inferior pedestrian experience along a primary street. Again, there is no inferior pedestrian. The inferior pedestrian experience exists today. What we're providing is a vast improvement, I think, and your staff even wrote the encroachment does not create an inferior pedestrian experience. The waiver shall not allow the creation of significant incompatibilities with nearby buildings. There are no nearby buildings or uses of land that would be incompatible because they're all either A, it's a railroad tracks and parking lot, or B, those buildings won't be in existence there today, or they're existing commercial buildings that we're working around. C, the waiver shall not erode the connectivity of the street and sidewalk. Again, we feel this is a significant improvement, and your staff, I think, agrees that it will not erode the connectivity of the street network. And lastly, the waiver shall not reduce the quality of civic open space, and it does not reduce the quality of civic open space. In fact, really doesn't impact the quality of civic open spaces. So that is the first waiver, which is the reduction of the setback from floors 1 through 3. Now we're talking about the second waiver, front setback, 3rd floor and above. So the code requires a minimum of 20 feet. We're proposing 0 to 20 feet setbacks. And you can see in yellow, those yellow areas are where the facade is less than 20 feet setback from the property line. And again, the same rationale exists. We are facing railroad tracks and paid parking. We are creating a significantly improved pedestrian experience. And the openness that you would normally be worried about allowing waivers to your setbacks 3rd floors and above really doesn't exist because there are no buildings on the other side or the opposite side of the street. So we're not creating an enclosed feeling for pedestrians. In fact, the feeling will continue to be open. So again, we don't feel that it adversely affects the neighboring area for these reasons. Facing Southeast 2nd Avenue and the railroad tracks, we're creating a minimum 10 feet of arcade and sidewalk for pedestrians and bikes. And the openness of Southeast 2nd Avenue, which I think your staff even refers to in their staff report. So that mitigates the lack of a setback on the 3rd floor or higher. Second, not significantly diminishing the provision of public facilities. This doesn't impact public facilities at all. It doesn't create an unsafe situation. In fact, this waiver would allow for the arcade and allow for, again, that 10 feet minimum of pedestrian clear zone and pathway. It would not negatively impact public safety because of that. It doesn't result in the grant of a special privilege because of the location of the building and because of the uniqueness of where we are located, actually. And then these four other criteria, not resulting in an inferior pedestrian experience along a primary street. I think we've covered that. Not allowing the creation of significant incompatibilities. Again, there are no nearby buildings that this would impact. Across the street is parking and railroad. It won't erode the connectivity of the sidewalk network or negatively impact any adopted bicycle or pedestrian master plan. Again, your staff would agree that it does not erode the connectivity of the street network. And lastly, the waiver shall not reduce the quality of civic open spaces, and your staff agrees that it will not. Those are the easy ones. Those are the easy ones. I think your staff would agree that and you can ask them, I don't think that they would really object to that. I think the real rubber meets the road on this particular waiver is the omission of required pedestrian pathway. I think we've even talked about this before in front of this board. So the ordinance that requires a pedestrian pathway is for buildings with more than 250 feet of street frontage shall provide a pedestrian or bicycle passageway at least 10 feet wide, connecting rear alleys and or parking to the public sidewalk. The passageway elevation shall have storefront windows with base between 9 inches and 3 feet high with transparent glazed windows. So the ordinance doesn't require this passageway to be open to the public. It doesn't say that in the ordinance because we've provided a resident passageway from Southeast 1st to Southeast 2nd, internal to the building, 10 feet wide. Mr. Casello's even advised there are some windows looking into the pool courtyard. So we provided passageway from ingress. We also provided an additional pathway from our building's lobby, the ingress-egress point, which I'll show you in a second, to the commercial space. It's 10 feet of sidewalk with a portion is covered with covered arcade. And again, access is provided from a garage to the sidewalk via stairs and internal corridors. I'm gonna get to the graphics. I think they really show the picture, and then we can get to the criteria if you want to get to the criteria. So this is the internal passageway in yellow that goes from Southeast 2nd to Southeast 1st. It's 10 feet wide, and again has windows overlooking this pool court right here. Okay. We feel that meets the intent of the LDR, and so we really shouldn't necessarily be having this waiver, but we feel like we meet the intent of the LDR, if not have provided the passageway here in this yellow area. We've also, and this is another version of the site plan, I think that really illustrates this better, is provided stairway access and a passageway from the garage to the commercial space. So this is where the access from the garage is. It's a stairwell. This is the lobby of the building, and a 10-foot minimum sidewalk is provided down Southeast 2nd through an arcade to the commercial space here and the plaza. Now, if a resident wanted to go to the green space on the southwest side, they would go out the lobby here on Southeast 1st, make a left, and go to that green space here. So the intent, which is to provide pedestrian and bicycle pathways to not just the garage to the commercial, but to two alleyways, or public streets if you want to call them that too, is met. And we really feel strongly about this. This passageway is important to our internal connection. It is, we've been designed on this project for more than 16 months, if not 18 months. And we really feel strongly about this. Secondly, this is a blown up version of the rendering to give you another idea of how this works. Here are the stairs from the garage, right here, and pedestrians can walk right through this brand new pedestrian and bicycle pathway through a covered arcade that doesn't exist today to the commercial space. We're proposing 165 units in total. So it's not a substantive or substantial amount of pedestrian traffic that we're talking about. Further, none of that exists there today because I told you it's almost impossible to walk without taking your life in your own hands. And again, the pedestrian and bicycle impact to the network is minimal because of the significant improvements we're making as part of this project. And again, we feel like we not only meet the intent of the code, we meet the code with the passageway provided. The other part of having an internal passageway like this is to break up some of the mass of the building, the LDR says, and I wanted to show you the mass is broken up in this case with the tremendous amount of articulation. And this is just the property line, it highlighted in pink, and the articulation of the building highlighted in blue on the ground floor, so that from a pedestrian level, you are not going to see one large expanse of building throughout the whole block that weaves in and out of the building and provides different heights as well. Home stretch. I wanted to remind everybody on the board that this property is part of the neighborhood stabilization map in our comprehensive plan, which shows that it needs revitalization, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here. Again, we have substantial neighborhood support, no opposition for this project. My client and Mr. Rosen has reached out personally to every property owner, and you can see the property owners surrounding the property that have signed letters of support for the project. We have received more than 160 petition signers and letters in support. Lastly, do we meet the criteria for the waivers? Absolutely yes. As far as the setback on the first floor and the setback of first through third floors and setback on the third floor and above, absolutely yes. The juice is worth the squeeze there. There is no opposite building on the other side which will create any sort of massing or pedestrian issues that would make people feel like they're closed in, which is the absolute last thing we want to do. And then lastly, the pedestrian pathway. Not only do we feel that we meet the intent of the code, we feel like we meet the code both with the internal passageway and pathway provided, as well as the one provided along Southeast 2nd. I know that was a lot of information, and we have staff's presentation. We're here to answer any questions, and I thank you so much for your cooperation and your, I can't think right now, but thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Rosenberg.
All right, good evening. So the project site is comprised of 14 parcels in the South 200 block between Southeast 1st Avenue and Southeast 2nd Avenue. In total, it's about 2.3 acres. It's zoned Central Business District within the Railroad Corridor Subdistrict, and the project currently has 4 street frontages. Southeast 1st Avenue and Southeast 2nd Street are primary streets, and Southeast 2nd Avenue and Southeast 3rd Avenue are secondary streets. And the waivers requested are associated with a Class 5 site plan for the construction of a 5-story mixed-use building called Delray Swan. Going into the waivers requested, just to recap, the first waiver is to reduce the front setback along Southeast 2nd Avenue from a range between a minimum of 10 feet to a maximum of 15 feet to instead allow a range of a minimum of 0 feet to a maximum of 30 feet. The second waiver is to reduce the front setback above the third floor along Southeast 2nd Avenue for portions of the building from the required 20 feet to instead allow a minimum range of 0 feet to 20 feet. And lastly, the third waiver is to omit the provision of the 10-foot wide pedestrian passageway. So going into the first setback, which is the setback for the first to third stories, the area outlined in red is the area between the property line and the building line, which provides a setback between 0 and 30 feet for the first through third floor. The code requires a minimum front setback of 10 feet and a maximum setback of 15 feet. So with the staggered building line, there are areas where the building meets the required minimum and maximum front setback, but then there's also areas where it doesn't meet those requirements, and it either provides a lesser setback or a setback that's greater than what the code allows. Some reasons for the lesser or greater setback is to accommodate the multiple frontage types. There's stoops, arcades, and lobbies along Southeast 2nd Avenue. Also, there's areas that exceed the maximum allowed front setback along Southeast 2nd Avenue, and that's typically to accommodate some of the back of house facilities such as the trash room and the loading area. Going into the second waiver, which is the waiver for the front setback above the third floor, the code requires a portion of the building above the third floor to be set back a minimum of 20 feet instead of a minimum of 10 feet, and the request is to provide a setback above the third floor between a range of 0 and 20 feet. So similar to the first waiver, due to the staggering of the building line, there's areas that meet that 20-foot setback requirement, and there's areas that don't. The areas that don't meet the 20-foot setback above the third floor are outlined in red here. The architectural style proposed is Anglo-Caribbean, and there's architectural detailing throughout the facade, which helps soften the intensity of the structure, even though the additional setback isn't provided in certain portions of that facade. So while providing the required increased setback along the entire facade could provide more shifts in the massing, the facade includes architectural details that still create points of interest. This is a rendering. The applicant showed the same rendering. It's just showing the current proposed development. This provides a little bit more context as to the building placement in relation to the sidewalk and the street. It could change up until the point the Class 5 does come before this board again, but just wanted to show it for context. Now going into the waiver for the pedestrian passageway. So that is to omit the required 10-foot pedestrian passageway that's required for buildings with more than 250 feet of street frontage. The passageway typically, it has to be 10 feet wide, and it has to connect rear alleys or parking areas to the public sidewalk. So here's the current proposed site plan just to kind of show the scale of the development, which stretches the entire length of this block. This graphic shows the circulation that would exist using the current pedestrian network that's available. So the black arrows show the areas on the edge of the block where there's existing sidewalks, and the red dotted areas are points along the sides of the property that do not have sidewalks, which would force pedestrians, if they were trying to traverse around the entire block, they would have to walk into the street at those points. These are some suggested potential alternatives that were suggested during the technical review process. It includes providing a walkway at the southeast corner and the northeast corner of the property, so that at a minimum, even if that pedestrian passageway wasn't provided, there'd still be a complete sidewalk connection around the site. So just something for the board to consider. And then this graphic here, the blue outline shows the subject block, and it's overlaid over a similar size block in the downtown. The blocks being overlaid, or the block that's being overlaid on currently has 5 cut-throughs, while the proposed Delray Swan block only has 2 cut-throughs currently, one along Southeast 2nd Avenue and one along Southeast 3rd Street. But both of those cut-throughs don't have complete sidewalk connections. So the safety concern would be for, again, the pedestrians having to go into the street if they were to traverse the entire area of the block. And then these are just some other examples in South Florida. 3 are from Delray Beach. These all have pedestrian passageways. And in most cases, they're not just to provide pedestrian connectivity. They're meant to provide pedestrian connectivity for not just the residents of the building, if there's residential, but also for the public, and also provided to create points of interest and also a sense of place, also some shaded areas as well due to the heat and rain. And these are just going over the waiver criteria. So it's a little bit more detailed in the staff report, but just so the board can consider to make sure that the waivers being requested don't adversely affect the neighboring area, do not create an unsafe situation, don't grant a special privilege. And then also, because the sections of the code that's seeking relief is within the central business district, there's additional waiver criteria to make sure that the waivers being requested don't result in an inferior pedestrian experience, also don't create any significant incompatibilities with surrounding buildings, don't erode the connectivity of the street and sidewalk network, and don't reduce the quality of civic open space. These are a summary of the board considerations, also detailed in the staff report, and that concludes staff's presentation. Here are the optional board motions for all 3 of the waivers, and we'll leave that up here. Oh, yeah.
Good evening, board members. Julian Gudanik. I just want to add a couple things. Apologize for my voice. It's a little raspy. I just wanted to bring attention to a couple points. One being that this block is a little bit unique in that it doesn't have an alley. Typically blocks have an alley, and the way that the code provision is written, it specifically references that the passageway is meant to provide connections from the alley to the public street. That's typically because properties terminate at the alley, because alleys are prominent on most blocks in the city. However, in this case, we don't feel that it's meant to say that because there's no alley, therefore the pedestrian passageway is not required. We think that the passageway really should just be providing connection from First Avenue to Second Avenue to sort of help facilitate connectivity, which is the full intent of the regulation to begin with. Just in this case, it's not to an alleyway. The second point I want to bring forward is kind of to reiterate something that the applicant referenced, which is that the existing pedestrian experience on this block isn't particularly high quality. It is a little bit unsafe with the way the driveways interact with the street, and it is all true that this project would sort of help mitigate a lot of that issue by bringing forward a new project. However, the remaining issues that would exist, which is the absence of the sidewalk on the northwest and the southeast corner, would be magnified potentially by the amount of increased pedestrian traffic that a 165 unit project would see. So I think it's important to note that while it might not be an issue currently, this project would bring significantly more people to the block that could cause a potential issue. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Is there any rebuttal from the
Yes,
city's
Madam
report?
Chair. Yes, briefly. So, and thank you for staff. And by the way, I was so remiss in not thanking your staff. They've been working, Julian and Alexis. I think this is one of your first projects when you both got here. So we've been working with them for a long time and feel very comfortable with them, and thank them for all of their cooperation and help and assistance through this process. But on this particular issue, and I like this graphic a lot, because the proposed sidewalks that staff is seeking us to install here, we don't think are particularly safe. Why? Because nobody can see through these sidewalk areas from the street per se. It creates dark spots where if pedestrians are walking and there's somebody with ill intent, it's going to be, it could be a problem. And same thing for here. This sidewalk here and this sidewalk here. Secondly, and more importantly, we provide the passageway and connections. The ordinance does not require these connections to be public. It doesn't say that it must be open to the public in the ordinance. Your staff wants it to, but it doesn't say that. Instead, we're providing a passageway here from one lobby to the other lobby, from First Avenue to Second Avenue for our residents. And the major difference between our building and what your staff showed, I think, here, is that our building is 100% residential on the first floor. Many of these buildings are commercial on the first floor, making sense to have pedestrian activity through the first floor commercial. Our building doesn't have that. Our building is 100% residential, except for that northeast corner, which is commercial, which, by the way, we provide several connections to around the site, and an improved pedestrian experience. And then lastly, this graphic, while I can understand what staff is trying to say here, this graphic is on Atlantic Avenue in the middle of the downtown. We are not on Atlantic Avenue. We are 2 blocks south of Atlantic Avenue. And the second point here is that at our location, where is the pedestrian activity coming from? It's not necessarily coming from the south of us. There isn't a large, there's residential to the south of us, but it doesn't seem that there's going to be a significant amount of pedestrian activity that's going to need the public passageway that isn't required by code. So I think I've beaten a dead horse. Thank you so much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We just wanted to clarify that the two, do you want to go to the slides that are the options we suggested? So we just want to clarify, we're not stating that this is required by any means. We were just trying to sort of brainstorm some alternatives that could help mitigate some of the potential issues if it's the case that they decide not to move forward with the passageway, which they didn't, and in the event that you decide to approve it, this could be an alternative that would help alleviate some of that issue, potentially or not. It's up for you to decide. Again, it's not required. We just are offering it as an option.
Okay, this is a very big project, so I think that we'll have a lively discussion. So,
Chair, before we begin, if I have a few minutes.
yes, please.
So first, just a reminder, this is a recommendation of only a waiver. So the site plan and the proposed project are largely irrelevant to you today. Okay. And they are not really before you as a discussion point. I have some concerns because the majority of the evidence that you heard today was all about this project and how the project will satisfy the elements of the waiver. Unfortunately, our land development regulations at this current time do not travel together. So the waiver is independent and apart from the project approval. Now, thankfully, we're working on that, and we have a Chapter 2 amendment so that these things will be done in harmony instead of this bifurcated process. But the project that's proposed today is not guaranteed to be the project that would be approved or the project that will come before SPRAB. We hope that that's the intention, and it may be, and Neil may stand up and say we have every intention of proposing exactly what's been presented, but that's not the way the land development regulations currently work. And also remind the board that the quasi-judicial rules specifically tell us that whether it's a good project or not a good project, or whether there's support or opposition to the project, is irrelevant. So any evidence you heard about public support, about it being a great project, has nothing to do with land development regulations. The code also does not direct you to compare the current conditions versus proposed future conditions. So any evidence you heard about what the future may look like is not what the board's looking at. The board's looking at whether granting these waivers specifically meets the criteria that's in the land development regulations. there is so section 2.4.7b, which is the procedures for obtaining a waiver. Subsection 4 specifically grants the ability to impose conditions on a waiver if the board was going to consider any evidence about the proposed project satisfying any element of the land development regulations for a waiver. I would highly encourage the board to place a condition that waiver only be granted if the proposed project is the final project that moves forward, because you're relying upon that in some way to grant the waiver. I still don't think it'd be appropriate, but if the board members want to look at it that way, you can impose a condition. And I think it would be highly appropriate to place a condition on these waivers that it be tied to the specific project as presented to the board.
And we're allowed to do that?
I believe so, because it's the actual language. Conditions may be imposed upon the granting of a waiver to the extent they are directly related to mitigating adverse effects which may be created. And so if your decision is that it does not adversely affect the neighborhood because the project shows you a pedestrian clear zone and staggered frontage and connectivity in a way that makes sense, then the only way you can find that element is if you impose a condition that it be tied to the project as presented. So that if the developer were to sell, or the developer finds that there's something underground that makes what they proposed infeasible, that this board's not stuck with waivers that were granted and then having a change in the project.
Madam Chair, may I just make a quick point of order, which may help ease everybody's fears, is that and staff can confirm, we're in for site plan approval level 5. We've been in, we're in our 3rd round of TAC comments, 5th round of TAC comments. So I hope that will give this board some comfort level as to the project not changing, and we would wholly agree to that condition if you felt it necessary.
Thank you. Okay. Board comments. Mr. Baffer.
So I think this board's been pretty consistent on waivers. There are times where we have found a waiver is necessary and appropriate, for various reasons. I just don't see that necessary and appropriateness in this case. I mean, the applicant has an enormous site. He's got to be able to figure out how to squeeze his programming in without giving up setback space. I mean, I don't see that this would be an appropriate need for granting waivers, particularly with setbacks.
All right, Ms. Perdue.
I wouldn't have a problem granting the setbacks if the architectural style is what's proposed. I think if it was changed, I would have a problem if it went to masonry modern or something that didn't have as much detail on it. It is a very unusual size and shape property in an unusual location, so I understand, they're working, with somewhat of their hands tied on certain things, but I don't know that the waiver for the pedestrian walkway, there's a lot of space there. They can get a pedestrian walkway in there, and the idea of that it's not safe to be on the outside, I don't see why that's so unsafe as compared to putting it in the middle, so I think it's something that can be done, and I definitely would have to have some assurance that the architectural style is not going to change.
Mr. Cohen.
Okay. I think I'm okay with the first and the second waiver, and part of that is because the building is staggered, so you don't meet the setback in some places, but you meet it in other places, and it sort of mitigates it a little bit. I don't quite understand what's happening with the sidewalks. So in those two corners, there are no sidewalks at all?
Correct. Yeah, there's a lack of a sidewalk, I think, on the majority of the 2nd Avenue side of the block. That will not be the case if this project is built the way it's shown, because they're proposing a sidewalk adjacent to their property. But there is no
Okay.
sidewalk where the red X is. There's no sidewalk currently, and there wouldn't be one.
That's because it's all building? It's building.
There's a building in both of those adjacent properties that are like removed from the subject property.
okay.
There's existing
Yeah.
buildings there. And
And there's no sidewalk now?
correct.
There's no
And-
sidewalk at present?
And there wouldn't be theoretically unless those buildings came forward for redevelopment.
There's
And
no,
so, yeah.
I'm sorry, there's no city easements that allow
I don't.
people,
So I know that the property to the southeast went through a site plan review process, and as part of that, they were required to include an easement. However, that project never moved forward. As far as I'm aware, the permits were never issued, and that project expired. So we can't rely on that project coming forward. Like I mentioned, in the future, if something were to be redeveloped, they would be required to either provide the sidewalk or provide an easement. But we don't know if or when that would happen.
I'm sorry, I
So,
interrupted.
to that point, and we've had those. Oh, Jeff Costello, Jason Planning Solutions. Hello. We've had a lot of conversation with staff on that, and so since as we were presenting to this and we were talking to the applicant, if it needed to be, since there is a dedicated sidewalk easement, we would work with staff and that property owner to provide the sidewalk connection. The concern is the northwest. I know city did Osceola Park improvements, improved that street. Why that one section wasn't installed, I don't know. I know it could be a commercial. Maybe they didn't have the right of way. There's various nuances there. So we don't really know what exists. We know there is an easement to the southeast corner, and we're willing to continue the decorative sidewalk to that point.
And so, are you proposing those internal sidewalks? They're not, maybe not internal, but.
They're not part of the proposal.
Okay.
We suggested that as a potential option, but as of now, they have not proposed them.
Yeah, we had a concern, the fact that there's residents with their patios right there. And if you have that to the public and you provide that passageway, there is a security when the general public's walking by there. But we fill that gap would really accomplish the goal of the connectivity that the city desired.
Wait, which gap?
Let me show it again. Right there. That's where you have the sidewalk easement. I think the board approved that site plan about 2 years ago. Site plan expired, the easement was dedicated, and so that property owner would have installed the sidewalk, but we're willing to continue that with the same streetscape design that we're proposing.
As a condition.
As a condition.
So I think part of your argument is that pedestrians basically are residents, not members of the public.
Yes.
I'm not sure that I agree with you.
Okay.
Pedestrian is somebody who's walking around, basically. If you look up the definition of pedestrian, it's just anybody who's walking around on the street. So,
Mr. Hill, my contention was that the ordinance doesn't specify that the passageway must be open to the public. And because it didn't specifically specify that, I don't think that it is actually.
So you're like a glass is half empty kind of interpretation. that's your.
Whatever needs to be.
Okay,
But
good.
yes.
And will it be open to the public?
The proposed internal pedestrian here, from this lobby to this lobby, is not proposed to be open to the public,
Okay.
but all of the around the site obviously is.
Okay. And the other part of your argument is that the need for a walkway, it only says that it's to alleyways. I think, I don't know the exact wording. And in this case, it's another street, so it's not an alleyway.
Right. Well,
so I think maybe that might be amended, because I think the intent is to connect one side of the building to the other side of the building, for a convenient access for more public safety. So that might be somewhere where we can amend the code to make it more clear. But on the third waiver, I'm a no.
Okay.
So.
Okay, Ms. Gray.
I'm going to preface my comments by saying I have a great deal of respect for the client and the representatives of the clients that are here. I know the investment the client has made in the community continuously over a period of time, and I've worked with Jeff and Mr. Schiller on various fronts. And I say that to say I am at a point where we need to design to meet the specific criterias of the code and the capabilities of the site. In my opinion, I'm sitting here trying to wonder why we just listened to 2 very long presentations for a waiver around a specific design, when every single time legal has told us a waiver cannot be decisioned around a specific design. So in my opinion, this site needs to be redesigned to not create a self-imposed hardship, and in the second half of that, I think it would be granting a privilege. Redesign it, make it fit, and adhere to the code. But, you know, commission is going to be commission. So that's why we have said.
Can I just respond to that
Yes,
very
as long
quickly?
as it's
Very
brief,
quickly,
please.
very briefly. I understand what you're saying. I just want to remind this board that as part of this project, we are dedicating 10 feet off of Southeast Second, and we have corner clips on the northwest and the south, or the northeast and the southeast corner. So I understand what you're saying, and we understand what you're saying. You know, obviously we've gone through the rezoning and the site plan approval, rezoning and the land use plan approval process for this site, and have really been designing it to work within the community and to work within the district and the neighborhood. And yeah, we are bringing more density and intensity to the area.
You
There's
know
no
what?
question. I'm sorry.
And I do know your intent, but you know, tomorrow's promise to no one. The
Right.
project can
Sure.
change hands. I think that's the intent why we say waivers need to be able to stand alone and not around design, right? Everybody's intent is to build what they intend to build, and then life happens. So then we're left with what we're left with.
So I reviewed this project, and I have to say I concur with my colleagues. I feel that some of these waiver requests come up to us because the developer is attempting to build something that it doesn't fit within the space. And I'm very concerned where, yes, I understand that it's staggered, and in some places you're giving up, sometimes 30 feet, sometimes 10 feet, but then to have a 0 setback in some places, I think is just unacceptable, quite frankly. So it's a design dilemma, and that's why we have great architects, because they resolve these engineering/artistic problems. And I think that's why SPRAB exists, to kind of really take a hard look at this and make sure that we're in a harmonious ideal for our buildings. And before I came on this board, there were buildings that were being built that, in my view, have no setbacks, and that's one of the reasons I came on the board. So I think we have to be more mindful. Look, developers need to make a profit, of course, but then we need to be more mindful of these projects, coupled with the idea that waivers go with the property and not the project. So that's concerning as well. And and as Ms. Gray said, this is going to go to commission in any case. So I don't know. That's and I do appreciate it, and I appreciate the developer, and I appreciate working with you. I'm not bought in. So Mr. Bennett, what next?
We have-
Continuance, or do we vote?
Well,
or-
no, I mean,
It's a recommendation.
yeah, it's just a recommendation, so it's not a final action. I mean, if the applicant would like to postpone, I don't see any bobbing heads on that. So I assume the board will vote forward on a recommendation. So we have 3 different waivers. We'll do them one at a time. They have if anybody's eyes are good, they are on the first one is up on the TV. This is the waiver for the front setbacks for the first, second, and third story.
Can someone please make the motion?
I will move to recommend approval to the City Commission of a waiver request to the LDR Section 4.4.13D2A1 for the project Delray Swan 2022-063 to reduce the front setback for the first to third stories along Southeast 2nd Avenue from a required range of 10 feet to 15 feet to a range of 0 feet to 30 feet by finding that the request meets the criteria set forth in the land development regulations.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Rochelle, if you can please call roll.
I'm sorry, you said you did A?
I did
Move
A
to
because we
recommend
can
approval.
vote for it or against it then.
Okay.
It's just the same thing with B. You
Okay.
either vote for it or against it.
Gotcha.
Okay. That's my understanding anyway. Is that right?
Well, we've got a motion to recommend approval, and Mr. Cohen, you're still seconding that motion?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call and see what happens.
Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer.
No.
Annette Gray.
No.
Stephen Cohen.
Yes.
Carol Perez stepped down. Linda Perdeau.
Yes.
Dana Adler.
No.
Okay, so technically the motion fails. So if you don't have to read the whole entire thing at this point, but if somebody can make a motion to recommend denial to City Commission of the waiver.
Move to recommend denial to the City Commission of a waiver request to LDR Section 4.4.13D2A1 for the project Delray Swan 2022-63.
Second.
Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer.
Yes.
Annette Gray.
Yes.
Stephen Cohen.
No.
Carol Perez stepped down. Linda Perdeau.
No.
Dana Adler.
Yes.
Okay, and then we'll need a motion for the second waiver, which is the setbacks above the third story.
Moved and.
Wait, let her
And
put
that
it
should
up.
be the
I thought that
B,
was-
I think.
What is it?
I just want to clarify, I think that was, the board motions are also in the staff report, but I think this one is a copy. We accidentally included the one that also says the first to third story. It should be the setback above the third story.
Right, so it's here.
Okay.
Matt, if you want it here.
I can just
Yeah. It
just
says,
read above the first story, right?
yeah, the front's above the third floor.
The only thing is the numbers will
The
be
number is incorrect.
wrong.
It says
Okay.
first to
Yeah.
third.
Yeah, the cited section's incorrect, so if you could read off the computer, that'd be.
Okay. Wrong glasses. Move to recommend denial to the City Commission of a waiver request to LDR Section 4.4.13D2A3A for the project Delray Swan 2022-063 to reduce the front setback along Southeast 2nd Avenue above the third floor from a minimum of 20 feet to instead allow a minimum range between 0 feet and 20 feet for a portion of the east facade by finding that the request does not meet the criteria set forth in the land development regulations.
You can please, we need a second.
Second.
And if you can please call roll, Rochelle.
Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer.
Yes.
Annette Gray.
Yes.
Stephen Cohen.
No.
Carol Perez stepped down. Linda Perdeau.
No.
Dana Adler.
Yes.
Okay.
I can do the next one.
I'll do it. We ready for the next one?
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right. Move to recommend denial to the City Commission of a waiver request to LDR Section 4.4.13D2A6 for the project Delray Swan, 2022-063, to omit the provision of a pedestrian pathway by finding that the request does not meet the criteria set forth in the land development regulations.
Second.
Okay. Pardon me, Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer,
Yes.
Annette Gray,
Yes.
Stephen Cohen,
Yes.
Carol Perez stepped down, Linda Perdeau,
Yes.
Dana Adler.
Yes. Okay, sorry, gentlemen. All right, now we go to.
Good night.
Good night. Item F, and we have Mr. Godonic, if you can enter the item into the record, please.
Yes, hello again, board members. Julian Godanic, Senior Planner. I'd like to enter into the record at this time agenda item 9F. It's file number 2022-151. It's a Class 5 application for 354 Southeast 5th Avenue. And I will pull up the presentation and turn it over to the applicant representative.
Okay, has there been any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
No.
Okay. All right, Mr. Silberstein. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Same here. I'm back. So I'm back. I put the civic space in, as you know, that was a waiver that was denied, and what else did I do with this plan? Oh yes, I had to reduce the pools because nobody could get their head over that, wrap their heads around that pool. So I made the pool smaller. So what we're looking at here is an elevation on 5th Avenue. There are 8 units. The center portion of the architecture is distinguished from the rest of the other units is because that's really where the civic space occurs. So what I did is on that center portion, there are 2 units there. They're vertical, wood, clad, aluminum louvers that rise above the whole height of the building, and they change by dimension. Most of them are 4 inches on center, where the sliding door opens in a bedroom, so you can't fall out. And then the other areas, I made them a little wider, so you have some movement in the facade. The vertical members are 2 inches thick, and they're 6 inches deep, I believe, or 8 inches deep. The other units have porches on the ground floor. As you can see, you step up as a stoop, and you'll see columns that rise about 35 feet high, all the way up to the top of the roof, and so it becomes like a colonnade, really, of the 4 units on the east, on the left and the right side. That's about it. If you look at the landscape plan, it's heavily landscaped along 5th Avenue. We have an 8-foot landscape strip on the avenue. Then we have an 8-foot sidewalk, and then we have, again, green space between the sidewalk and the actual porch. So, okay. So it's like an angle, so you can see how how those vertical columns rise. So there's a lot of interplay between the facade. It's not just a flat facade. You're going to see a lot of shades and shadows. And then at the top of the roof, I have openings in the roof that will also create circular shadows on the facade. And then in the center, you can see the civic space that has a center portion which would be dedicated towards a sculpture in the center, and then there'd be seating around it. A little close-up view of the center portion. And then this is the rear, where it didn't really change much. There's you have the garages on the alleyway. Above the garage, there's a pool. So there's a pool deck on the roof deck of the garage that connects to the units on the 2nd floor, as well as the courtyard, which is in the middle between the garage and the unit. I believe. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Gdanek for the city, please.
Okay, so it's Class 5 site plan application. This is an aerial view of the subject property, 354 Southeast 5th Avenue. Currently sits vacant. The land use is commercial core, and the zoning district is central business district with the central core sub-district. Looking at the adjacent properties, and you can also see it from the aerial across the street, there is Mallory Square townhouses. And then to the south, there is this sort of low-scale single-story building, and then to the north is a vacant property as well. However, I just wanted to point out that that has a project approval on it you guys might be familiar with. It's fairly recent, so this project, if built, will be directly adjacent to the subject property that we are talking about today. The Valhalla condominiums, which was discussed earlier today, is also just one block north, and then you have the Aloft Hotel. So there's a lot of sort of masonry modern development occurring along this corridor right now. This is the subject property, again sitting vacant, and this is the request. It's a 8-unit, 3-story townhouse development with site plan, with associated landscape plan, a landscape waiver, which we'll get into in a second, and architectural elevations. So a bit of background, as mentioned, the subject property consists of four originally platted lots. They're unified under a single title, and it currently is vacant. You may be familiar with this property because you've seen it before with some waiver requests. Specifically, there was a previous request to reduce the amount of civic open space that was required. There was a waiver regarding architectural proportion ratios and then pool setbacks. The applicant has revised the scope of work and the design to no longer require any of those waivers. So they do not require relief except for the landscape waiver, which we'll discuss later. So looking at the site plan, you have the 8 townhouse units. They're sort of composed in two groups of 3 with a middle group of 2, where the civic open space recesses at the center of the design. On the front facade, adjacent to 5th Avenue, you have the porch frontage types. As the architect Jeffrey referenced, there is a sort of vertical column element of the porches that extends the full extent of the 3 stories. There's foundation landscaping at the front of these porches. There is an 8-foot pedestrian walkway, which exceeds the minimum. And then there's a pretty substantial curb zone with ground cover landscaping, as well as shade trees throughout the whole length of the property. At the rear of the project, you have the driveway access for all of the units. The required parking is provided in the driveways, as well as the 2-car garages. Excuse me. I want to draw attention to the fact that in between each driveway, there is a landscape buffer where they are providing full shade trees, which exceeds the amount that they're required. This should help sort of soften the mass of the project from the lower scale residential to the west. So we appreciate that inclusion of the shade trees in the rear. The density is less than what could be required if maximized. They're just a little over half of what they could be built theoretically based off of the thresholds. Each unit contains an interior courtyard and then a sort of accessory garage structure in the rear with the pool elevated above that. Vehicle access and trash pickup is isolated in the alley, which is a good feature because it preserves 5th Avenue to ensure that we have a quality pedestrian experience along that corridor. Blowing up into the streetscape, actually I'll zoom into the civic open space. Their applicant is proposing a public art typology for the civic open space. That black circle is a sculpture. The specifics will to be determined at a later date, and that's subject to approval by the Public Art Advisory Board. But in addition to that, they have some benches and some landscaping, and then the stoop entrances for units 4 and 5 are framing the sides of the civic space. And the fact that it's designed as is and sort of spills into the remaining front setback, which integrates into the streetscape, makes the civic space look a little bit bigger than it really is, which we appreciate. excuse me. Looking at the frontage types, again, in the streetscape, there are porches. The section on the left kind of shows how that works. The line weight's a little bit light, but you can see the columns coming down at the base of the stairs. That projects into the front setback. It ranges slightly because the property's at an angle, but at the maximum it's 8 feet. And then there's foundation landscaping in front of that to soften that from the sidewalk. This just kind of zooms in on the required pedestrian clear zone. Again, it's 8 feet. There's a substantial curb zone, which with landscaping, which should provide a buffer from the sort of busy traffic on the corridor and pedestrians. And then there's the foundation landscaping again, which leads into the porches. Landscape plan, again, it's kind of related to everything I just said, but this just shows it in a bit more highlighted fashion. You can see the shade trees in the front as well as the rear. There's ground cover interspersed throughout. And then I just want to talk about the waiver quickly. So specifically, the requirement is 5 feet of a landscape area between adjacent property lines and vehicular use area, which is the driveways on the end caps. The applicant is proposing 3 feet 7 inches, which is less than required. However, I do want to point out that they're still providing a shade tree and hedges. So they're meeting the intent of the regulation from that respect because they're providing the foliage that's needed. It just isn't at the width that would be required by code. Moving into the design, the architect gave an overview of their design. It's masonry modern. It's a unique interpretation of that architectural style. Some elements that are customary of that style are predominant use of stucco with glass, wooded accented panels, and vertical louvers. Structural elements that are utilized preserve the sense of being carved from a solid mass. There's a lot of sort of thickness, but it's sort of elongated through the vertical language, which makes it feel carved from a structure, which is a key element of masonry modern. In the rear, you can see that the majority of the massive structure is pushed closer to 5th Avenue. The 3rd story and 2nd story does not extend all the way to the rear, which helps create more of a buffer and separation between the lower scale residential across the alley. These are the elevations, full facade on the top, and then it zooms in a bit more detail on the bottom. Again, it's stucco, glass, and wood are the primary materials utilized. Required findings with respect to architecture are from 4618. They were detailed in the staff report. Required findings for the site plan approval, consistency with the land use map, concurrency evaluations, which are detailed in the staff report, consistency with the comprehensive plan, and compliance with the LDRs. Again, all that was in the staff report. Your board options are to move approval of the Class 5 with landscape plan, landscape waiver, and architectural elevations. You can move approval as amended, you could move denial, or you can continue with direction. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this time, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Mr. Silverfund, is there a rebuttal for the city?
No.
Okay, great.
Sorry, one additional point. I didn't mention in the presentation, but the findings that you should apply to the landscape waiver are also referenced in the staff report. So if you want to read those off when it comes time there, they're located there.
All right. So we're going to open it up to board comments. Ms. Bordeaux, I think it's your turn to start.
I think I think I started last time.
Okay, Mr. Cohen then.
Oh, okay. Well, I just always really love Mr. Silverstein's designs. I think it's a great looking building. I think it's masonry modern, but not quite. It's quite a beautiful building, in my opinion. So I'm going to vote for it.
Okay. All right, Ms. Perez.
I mean, it's a simple landscape plan, kind of to go with the, the building. Very regimented. I think the oak trees out front will give you nice shade on that sidewalk. And I think before we had mentioned the roof line and it being flat, but and you're saying that like that was broken up from the previous version, because we don't have the previous version. I don't think we've seen it. Do you have a?
Technically, the other site plan never came before you because it was a waiver request that was ultimately denied by commission.
What was the waiver request?
There was elimination of the civic space, and then also to eliminate the, I think it was a 5-foot perimeter around the pools that were originally located on the roof.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then there was a facade composition ratio.
the ratio.
And so the way we've interpreted them, correcting that, is by introducing the civic open space and pushing the 2 middle units back further. It's now like a composition of 3, 2, and 3 as opposed to 8 single ones.
Single, right.
So that's how they've addressed that comment.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gray.
I don't have any comments.
Mr. Baffer.
That's what I say. I really like this design.
Yeah.
Like, I like the use of the courtyard and the garage with the pool and the garage. Like, I'm looking at these, you know, the design of it, and I'm thinking this is. I really like the way this is done. I don't like the front facade, but you know, architecture is subjective, I guess. But it just, to me, it doesn't smell like Delray when I look at, you know, this, you know, flat, very industrial looking, you know, base of it. I mean, it's odd that I look at the rear, the alley side, and I think I kind of like this back of house elevation better than I do the front of house. But again, you know, architecture is subjective, but that's just my opinion of it.
So, Linda. That's
That's
the end
okay.
of the evening, sorry.
No, I agree. I just don't see that it like fits in with the other architecture on Fifth Avenue, but again, that's personal. It's just a little too stark for me, especially, yeah, it's just so linear, and it, and maybe when it's more dimension is shown in real life, it'll look different. But right now, it's just a little too flat.
So, I really appreciate your design, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question about the courtyard and the sculpture. I know we're not approving that, but do you have a vision for the sculpture?
Yes,
that would
you
sort
know,
of
it's
help?
funny. I was in Montreal, and there was this sculpture that was actually, they have a public and art spaces in Montreal, and they had this sculpture in front of a building, and it was just a sculpture that was, like 15 feet tall. And then at the top, it became like a windmill that opened in and out. So I think it should be something that's interactive. That's not just a dead piece of art, but that's something that's interactive with the people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what I'm thinking of.
So something with literal movement or sculptural
Literal movement. Well, yeah,
some
within the
undulation.
yeah, so that it takes a different form as it goes from 0 to 30. You know what I mean? And then it starts. So I notice it on the street where everybody stops and looks at this thing. You know what I mean? So that's what I think. You know, not just some kind of steel red thing sticking out. You know.
And then in your vision of this sculpture, just so I can like really in my head think about the space as a whole, because it is very linear, but I love the idea of a sculpture. I mean, do you think that do you envision color in the sculpture? Do you envision it being more neutral?
You know, I always like to work with everybody as a team. So when I work with an artist, I like to hear what they have to say. You know, because it's just like they want to know what I have to say. So it's going to be a collaborative effort, and so it's hard to really pinpoint anything right now. But that's how I work.
All right. I don't mean to put you on the spot, and this is really not part of this approval, but it just, for me personally, it helps me get the space in my own head a little better. Yeah, so I think that you've done a wonderful job, and with whatever kind of sculpture comes about, I love how you said that you want it to be interactive in some way. Yeah, I think that I think it's going to be beautiful. So I'm
Thank
in
you.
favor of the project.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
It's hard. I know it's very hard to see it in 3 dimension. I mean, this has been the problem for architects forever. You know, it's like I do homes for people, and they say, "Is that what it looks like?" You know, it's like no matter how many 3-dimensional drawings I show, it's still a surprise. And there is a lot of 3-dimensional thing going on here. So it's not a flat building at all. Mm-hmm. It has depth. The porches are 8 feet deep. You know, it's with the stoops going up. It reminds me of the old time when we had townhomes and you actually stepped up and you had a place to sit and wave to your neighbor or whatever. You know, so it's not one of those dead buildings. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's what I want to say.
You know, I do think that as far as the presentation goes, the building is delineated and shown very well. I think another slide should have been with the landscape, and I think that that would also help the board. So maybe not now, but in the future, coming back, I think.
I didn't want to hide the building.
Well, I think I think you could do 2 slides.
Oh yeah,
I think
right.
you could show the building and then you show another slide.
Yeah.
This is with and without, and I think it really helps everybody.
It will. You know, I mean, you know, when you put all these oak trees together, you can have one continuous canopy. You know, and so. You know, remember you approved that Hampton Inn, you know, those oak trees that they have on 2nd? Did you see the finished product?
I did not approve that Hampton.
Yeah, well, anyway, they have the same thing, and it's already starting to become something.
Personally.
Okay. All right, so I think I'm comfortable calling for a motion to approve. Would someone like to please make a motion?
Do you have it handy? Yeah, no, we go ahead.
Oh, you want me to do it? Okay. All right. Okay. Move to approve the requested Class 5 site plan application 2022-151, including site plan, architecture elevations, landscape plan, landscape waiver for the property located at 354 Southeast 5th Avenue, by finding that the request meets the criteria in the LDR and is consistent with a comprehensive plan.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, Rochelle, if you can please call roll.
I'm sorry, who said?
Annette.
Okay, thank you. Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer?
No.
Annette Gray?
No.
Stephen Cohen?
Yes.
Carol Perez?
Yes.
Linda Perdue?
No.
Dana Adler?
Yes.
So
now what? We need Allison.
Yeah. So with the local rules state that a tie vote is no action. So the application has not been approved. It has not been denied. If there's any modifications or board discussion about what you found lacking, that could help either the applicant request a continuance or accept a continuance, or to get a vote that's not a tie. Unfortunately, if there's no movement, then quite frankly, I don't think the board can move. The board can't approve it tonight if there's going to be no movement. The only 2 options would be to either continue or vote to deny, so that it would trigger an appeal option. I don't know if the board, right now the item is still before the board. There's been no formal action taken, so we're still in board discussion if the board wants to discuss the item further.
All right, Ms. Gray.
Okay, so I didn't give a lot of comments because I wasn't here for the first meeting. And I didn't realize others were feeling the sentiments I was feeling. I was leaving it to the board members because they were here for the first meetings. So what I will tell you is this. Your vision did not translate well visually. So remember, not everybody on the board is an architect, right? And so when you articulate that there is depth and the stoop and the setback of the stoops, your visuals did you a disservice because I didn't see any of that. I originally, when I looked at it, thought it was a storage unit. And that's not to be disrespectful. I had to read the report to understand that there were townhomes. And when you spoke at the end, I imagined Philadelphia with the step up, with the townhouses, with the stoop, with the trees lining, with people walking up. So unfortunately for me, the design it's not consistent with the neighborhood. The design is very stark. I think you're brilliant, and I think you can show us better than this what you're thinking, right? So remember, there are some lay people, and we have to be able to see this, your concept, your vision, in the neighborhood with the surrounding properties and neighbors. And so what you have here for me doesn't fit. And I don't think your brilliance is coming through in what you've presented.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that you were forthcoming and you were honest. I am not going to change this design. I will resign from this project. I will tell my client, I will not work on this project. I will not change it, okay? Because I think it's a beautiful project. And I'm sorry that you weren't able to see it in the way you wanted to see it. I don't agree with you that it's a stark building. It's not a stark building at all. And when I look at the building that's next to this building that you approved, that's a stark building, okay? So I differ. So if it's not going to pass, you're going to have a different architect in front of you. I am not working on this project anymore.
And it's your prerogative.
I just wanted to say that, so the building that you just referred to, there was a photograph of it here, right?
Yeah. It's not, I think Julian had it. That thing.
Well,
seriously.
So there is that building, and we did approve it. I think that your building, yours would be right across from this?
Adjacent.
I think that actually they complement one another.
I agree.
So I don't see, I do think your building would complement it. I don't think it would be out of place and out of character.
Thank you.
Especially with this building across the street. But
Next
to it or across the street?
It's next to it. It's the same block.
Yeah, adjacent to the south.
Yeah, okay.
I agree. I think they're complementary as well.
I encourage you not to resign.
I will. I will.
And
this was going to be my last site plan approval submittal.
It might be just giving us a couple more renderings.
Okay, I'll do that, but I'm not changing the design.
Okay, well.
No, I think that's like there's a couple pictures where it just tilted slightly, and you can see then that there is some interest on the front.
On my presentation, there was some more larger scale.
Yeah, so you can see that there's some interest there and things, and plus with just that flat gray going up to the building, it just looks, I think that's what makes it look so stark. I know there are programs where they give you a 360 of the building from different angles and things.
No,
with
I
the
can
landscaping.
do
So
that. I can do that.
Yeah, I think that would help us get a feeling of what the building really looks like, rather than just, like she said, it just this flat parking garage type feel.
Because I don't think you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. I do think it has some depth to it, and I also think it complements the other building. And yeah, if you had a few more renderings, maybe try to accentuate the facade has some depth. Try to, and then the suggestion to have a landscape picture too, I think is a good one. Another just with the trees on there. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I concur. I don't feel that you need to resign from the project. I don't feel like you need to do anything else to the project. No, I think that it's a good project and it meets the criteria and fits in with the neighborhood. And I think that, it's difficult with lay people to really see. And I think that it would help to do a couple more renderings, perhaps with landscaping, as was said, perhaps with some sort of placeholder sculpture that shows movement, because I think that's going to be, and that's what you're going to see when you look at the building. So,
yeah, they told me that it's not part of this.
It's not, but I think it would just, again, you never know. Like sometimes if you put it in, people will think, oh, that's going to be there. But I think given where we're at right now, it would help, because that's what, you're going to be seeing landscaping and you're going to be seeing a sculpture. So,
question: if of the nose, are there any chance of that being changed, even with all these additional drawings and land? You know what I mean? I just would like to know some ways.
I don't think it'd be appropriate for a board member to answer that question at this meeting, because you don't know what will be presented. If a board member finds the design, regardless of what angle you see the design, as not meeting the criteria of the land development regulations, then you can communicate that, and I think that answers the question in a negative way. But I would not advise a board member to answer specifically a question that, as long as there's different renderings, my opinion can be swayed. Because we just don't know what those renderings are, or what those renderings will show. Those renderings could show you that the design is worse than you were anticipating with the flat. And I'm just not saying that's what would happen, but to answer that question now, I think would be inappropriate, because it's contingent evidence. It's not before you.
And again, just the intent of the additional visuals, assuming no changes are made, is so that you can make a determination that the project does or does not meet the criteria for the Class 5 site plan as a whole.
I have another question for the applicant. So these are those porches?
I'm sorry?
Are those porches on the ground floor?
Yeah, could I go to my presentation?
Because wouldn't you, would you need a railing there?
No, because the level is 30 inches high, and then we're going to grade the slope, and then we're going to put a landscaping in front of it.
And that will change the total look.
Yeah, that would change the total look.
Yeah.
Fine.
Rather than just
it'll soften the building, certainly.
Yeah.
Of course. Landscape does that, you look across the street, and you look at all our developments that are 10 years old, the trees have grown. You look at my homes, you don't even see them.
It looks like you have quite a larger porch, though, on this on this plan rather than on your renderings. Are your renderings true to the sizes of the porches and the walkways and such?
Carol, you're right.
Like there's something.
They're not drawn. They're supposed to be almost flush with the column, the face of the column.
Yeah, I think you're.
But
right.
on the floor plan, you see it that way.
Yeah.
Right?
I think your renderings. I think they can
Not accurate.
That's what I said. Your renderings are not representing your concept very well.
Okay. All right. So what do we do now?
Well, it sounds to me like we need more accurate renderings.
Okay.
And then, I can't promise anything, as Mr. Bennett said, but I think it will help.
Okay.
So we can move to continue with directions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just to, well, no,
No.
it was a 3-3 tie, which means that no action was taken on the motion, which is why the item is still technically before you. So Mr. Silberstein, you do not have an objection to a motion to continue, and you'll return it, and you've informed us that you do not intend to make any changes to your application.
Correct.
Okay. So if the board members would like to make a motion to continue, the applicant is willing to accept that motion. Just remind the board members that the applicant has confirmed that when they return, there'll be no changes. So if that impacts your vote in any way, that could also communicate something potentially to the applicant. So if a board member would like to make a motion to continue, sounds like where we're at right now.
I'll move to continue with direction.
I'll second.
You can please call roll, Rochelle.
Okay, Allison Thomas is absent. Benjamin Baffer,
No.
Nick Ray,
No.
Stephen Cohen,
Yes.
Carol Perez,
Yes.
Linda Perdeau,
Yes.
Dana Adler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so do we have a presentation from city staff today?
Okay, my apologies on that little delay. So just
he
as
was going to do the presentation.
As always, just the upcoming board meetings. Your next meeting will be September 27th. You probably saw our email. We had discussed and confirmed a quorum to add a meeting for September 13th, but given the items we were able to provide on the agenda tonight, and then the ones that are not yet ready but would be ready for the September 27th meeting, we're only having the one meeting in September, and then after that it is October 25th. And then we've talked about the Chapter 2 LDR amendments that are going through the process. There was a presentation at the Planning and Zoning Board meeting 2 nights ago on Monday. If you are interested to review that to see what is currently being proposed, I believe we're anticipating first reading at City Commission on September 18th. And so we discussed this a little bit at our last meeting, because those board members that your terms were going to be up at the end of this month. Remember, there's at the moment, a 60-day extension until we hopefully are able to adopt the Chapter 2 revisions, and that is because the duties of Planning and Zoning Board, SPRAB, and Board of Adjustment are anticipated to change, and as is some of the configurations and requirements of the board makeup as well. So I think you would have the option to say, well, I'm more interested in planning board, so I'd maybe prefer to be on that board instead of continuing on with SPRAB. It's something we need to work out, but just so you know, there are those changes in the works, and so we'd be having a little shift, which is kind of good, so that our new principal planner doesn't get too used to the current process. He's coming in and will be able to just hopefully have smooth sailing with the new process coming in. But it is intended, of course, to help streamline the development review process. Staff will have the ability to administratively approve some larger projects. Right now, we can really only administratively approve, very few things, to be honest. So, there'll be some adjustments in the review of some projects. So those are my updates. I don't know if you would like Mr. Ibrahim to speak. Sure. Speech.
Yes. Sorry, it's my first meeting, and thank you for having me here. Do you want to ask me, or you want me to introduce myself?
No, if you could introduce yourself, tell us where you came from.
Yes, I came from Palm Beach County, unincorporated. I worked for zoning. I was the zoning and building liaison. This is when I started 4 years ago, and then I got more responsibility to be between zoning and building and planning, and then land development. And then I got a call from Anthea and Amy, and then I moved to Delray. It's a great city. I look forward to serve the public and at the interest of the board. I have a background of an architecture. I have 3 degrees by education and practice. I'm an architect, planner, urban designer. I worked and practiced in 5 countries, now in Florida, enjoying the sun, and Delray Beach is a fantastic place for me to continue serving the community. Yes, I also worked in public sector and private sector, so I have both under my belt. And any question to me,
What countries?
Egypt, UAE, which is both Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and then England, London and Oxford, where I studied actually, and Denmark. I lived in Copenhagen and I worked, and I always say there are similarities between Denmark, Copenhagen and Florida, especially all the cities that are on the beach or on the Atlantic Ocean. So there are similarities, there are same challenges. It's challenging. Climate change is real, so we're here. Yeah, that's it. So these are the countries I work.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Bennett, do you have anything for us?
Just welcome, Mr. Ibrahim. It's good to meet you. I hadn't met you yet.
It's a pleasure.
I'm sure we'll be working together often. Although I've told them personally, I do want to publicly thank Miss Brandon and Miss Warren for providing you guidance in my absence. It's good to be back and see you guys again, and look forward to seeing you again in September.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's anything else, anything from the board, we can
Just a quick best practice, something you guys did amazingly. I loved how you placed the 3 iterations of the design on one slide so that we could see the metamorphosis and the change. Thank you so much for doing that, and I'm hoping we could continue to do that.
Yeah,
And
that was very helpful.
I'll make sure Ms. Rosenberg
Thank you.
Thank
hears
you.
your comments.
Great job.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.
This doesn't roll.
I was in that room so long, I almost ate all of Rochelle's chocolate. What happened to your chocolate? I was in that room for so long, I almost ate all of Rochelle's chocolate.